You and your child aren't cute at all. Get out of this house right now, my mother-in-law yelled. Huh? This house says that. I paused, confused. Understood, I said, and I started packing my things. My husband, Matt, looked surprised and worried as he watched me. Hey, you don't have to leave like that. But your dear mother told me to leave. I have to follow, don't I? I replied. Matt, don't waste your time with her. Come here and let's have cake, my mother-in-law said smugly, clearly proud of herself. I silently made up my mind. I would leave, take my daughter, and go back to my parents' house. My name is Jennifer. I'm 34 years old and work in an office. I married Matthew 2 years ago. We met on a popular dating app and became a couple after a year of dating. My husband, Matt, is kind and caring, but a little unreliable. When we were dating, he would plan fun dates and find restaurants I liked. After we got married, he helped with chores and brought me my favorite desserts when I was tired. A year after getting married, we had a lovely daughter, and Matt was very involved in taking care of her. I thought I had found a wonderful husband, but, of course, nobody is perfect. One of Matt's biggest flaws is that he's a mama's boy. At first, I noticed it when he talked about food. How's the food? I asked. It's good, but my mom's was a bit richer, he replied. I was surprised that he suddenly brought up his mother. As we talked more, it became clear that he thought his mom's cooking was the best, and he wanted me to cook like her. So, I tried making the dishes richer, just like he liked. Even when we went on trips, Matt would ask, "What should I buy for my mom as a souvenir?" I thought it was strange he only mentioned his mom, even though his dad was also around. Wouldn't it be more normal to say, "What should we get for my parents?" But no, it was always about his mom. At first, I thought it was sweet that he cared about his mother. After all, many men are mama's boys. But soon, I realized that his attachment to his mom was far beyond normal. I think we should live with my mom, my husband said out of nowhere. Wait, what? Why all of a sudden? I asked, surprised. It seems like my mom and dad are getting divorced, he explained. What, really? Yeah, apparently it's because my dad cheated, he added. I was shocked. My father-in-law always seemed like such a nice guy, but I guess you can't judge a book by its cover. It's sad to leave my mom alone, my husband continued, and if we live together, she can help take care of our daughter. That made sense. I was on parental leave, and with my mother-in-law's help, I could return to work sooner, but I was also a bit worried. My mother-in-law liked me, but would we get along if we lived together? I shared my concerns with my husband, and he reassured me, "Don't worry, it'll be fine. My mom was praising you, Jennifer." Hearing that made me feel better, and I thought maybe we could get along living together. However, I quickly realized how naive I had been. When my mother-in-law moved into our apartment, her attitude completely changed. She suddenly started being rude. "I can't believe you get to live in such a nice apartment. It's so annoying," she said. "Huh? Don't forget that you have this life thanks to my son," she yelled. I didn't understand why she was so angry, but I quietly replied, "Well, Matthew works hard and helps with chores, so I'm grateful." Her response wasn't totally wrong, so I just said, "Yes, I'll keep that in mind." "At least you're obedient. That's good," she said. From then on, she would get mad at me over the smallest things. "Why are you using soy sauce on the fried eggs? You're supposed to use sauce. The bath is lukewarm. Make it hotter next time. Why isn't there any ice cream after my bath? You should always have some ready." She barely did any housework even though she was home all day. I had hoped she would help more with our 1-year-old daughter, But she only did it when she felt like it and lost interest quickly. Living together was much harder than I expected. I realized that my mother-in-law's overprotectiveness toward her son was even worse than Matthew's attachment to her. "Matthew, how was work today?" she asked. "It was tough. My boss was on edge because we were so busy, so I had to be careful," Matthew explained. "Oh my, that's unforgivable. Should I protest to your company for allowing this power harassment?" Really? Over that?" Matthew looked surprised. "It's okay, Mom. We have to forgive and be patient," he said. "Oh, what a kind child you are. Just like an angel," she exclaimed. It felt strange to hear her call a grown man in his 30s an angel. "Thanks, Mom. But if things get worse, I'll ask for your help," Matthew replied. "Of course," she said, eagerly. It was ridiculous that she was ready to fight his battles at work, all based on his mood. I regretted agreeing to live with her and felt like I might go crazy if I stayed in the house all the time. So, I decided to put my daughter in daycare and return to work. When I told my mother-in-law, she got angry. "Why do you have to work too?" she snapped. I replied, "But you can enjoy having the house to yourself, right?" It seemed like she liked the idea, so she just said, "Don't neglect your housework," and didn't get any angrier. Dealing with her was exhausting because I never knew what would upset her. Luckily, my stress levels went down once I started working and spent less time with her. But about a year after we started living together, a new problem came up. It was my daughter's second birthday. We had a small party with cake and gifts, but my daughter had entered the terrible twos, and her mood swings were at their peak during the party. "Come on, here's a present. Open it," my mother-in-law said, handing her a gift. "No," my daughter shouted, pushing the present away. My mother-in-law was surprised by my daughter's reaction, but she held back her anger, thinking the cake might cheer her up. She scooped some up with a fork and tried to feed her. "Here's your favorite shortcake," she said. But again, my daughter said, "No," and swatted the cake away. The cream flew and landed right on my mother-in-law's forehead. "That was it," my short-tempered mother-in-law snapped. She shouted at my 2-year-old, "Enough. You're acting out because I've been nice to you." Startled, my daughter burst into tears. "What are you doing? She's just a child," I said as I quickly hugged my daughter to comfort her. "Shut up. What an unlovable grandchild," my mother-in-law spat. "Well, you're an immature grandmother," I shot back. "What did you say?" she yelled. It was shocking. No adult should talk to a toddler like that. "Shut up. You're such a disrespectful daughter-in-law. Can't you fix that attitude of yours?" she screamed. As we argued, my husband finally joined in, but instead of defending us, he sided with his mom. "You should be protecting your daughter, not hiding behind your mother," I said angrily. "We can always have more kids, but I only have one mom," he said. I couldn't believe my ears. That's the worst thing I've ever heard. What a horrible thing to say. "Hey, don't talk bad about Matthew," my mother-in-law cut in. "Neither you nor your child are cute. Get out of this house." I stopped myself mid-sentence. This house," I began but then paused. "Understood," I said calmly, and I started packing my things. My husband looked flustered and said, "Hey, you don't have to leave." "But your precious mother told me to." "Right, I must obey," I said coldly. "Matthew, don't waste time with her. Come eat cake with me," my mother-in-law said, smiling smugly. That was the last straw. I silently vowed to stand up for myself, took my daughter, and left to go back to my parents' house. I ignored the several calls from my husband and focused on what I needed to do. I prepared the divorce papers and sent them to him. He filled them out and sent them back. so I submitted them to the city office right away. Then, I called my now ex-husband. I submitted the divorce papers, so thanks for filling them out. Yeah, so me and my mom can keep living in this apartment. Right, you left on your own, he said. Sure, as long as you pay the rent, I replied. Of course, this was the apartment you rented, so I was worried when you left, but I figured I just need to change the lease to my name. Thanks for providing a comfortable place for me and my mom. I'm glad it worked out, I said. By the way, how much is the rent? Well, let's say about 150,000 yen, I said. What? What are you talking about? Tell me the actual rent. Don't joke around, he snapped. I'm not joking. That's because I'm the owner of the apartment. What? We talked about it when we got married. Remember? I made a lot of money in stocks a while ago and bought this apartment. You must have just assumed it was a rental. Matthew went quiet, clearly shocked. If you can't afford the 150,000 yen rent, I'll just sell the place. The apartment will sell quickly. Wait. If you sell it, where will my mom and I live? I don't care. You better leave quickly, or I'll report you to the management company. With that, I hung up, blocked his number, and later demanded child support through my lawyer. According to the lawyer, Jennifer's ex-husband looked tired and worn out. It must be hard for him, both mentally and financially, to pay child support while also supporting his mother. His mother even came with him to the negotiations, and the two of them spent the whole time blaming each other. It's your fault, they kept saying. Their close relationship, which had seemed so annoying before, fell apart quickly when they lost their comfortable lifestyle. Maybe their bond wasn't as strong as it seemed, but that wasn't Jennifer's problem anymore. On the other hand, Jennifer sold the apartment for a surprisingly high price. She saved all the money for her daughter's future and now works hard while living with her parents. She hopes to find love again someday, but for now, her main focus is earning as much as she can for her daughter. She also promises herself not to be overbearing or intrusive in her daughter's life, like her former mother-in-law had been. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.
Celebrating an idiot is just a waste of time. Geneva, my mother-in-law, spat out those words as if they were venom. Was she really saying that my daughter Lola was an idiot, and that celebrating her birthday was pointless? I couldn't believe it, especially since she had planned this birthday party herself. So for Geneva, today's party was never meant to be a joint celebration with Lola. It was all just an excuse to have her own birthday celebrated from the start. I glanced over at my husband Ned and saw his body trembling slightly. He must have been seething with anger too. That's what I thought when I looked at his face. But then Ned did something that made me doubt my eyes. Incredibly, he suddenly broke into a smile and agreed with Geneva's words. "You're right." I was stunned by his words and attitude. Why wasn't he saying anything back when she was being so insulting? And agreeing with his mom instead of defending our daughter? I couldn't help but feel suspicious of him. However, his next action nearly made me burst out laughing. My name is KC. I'm a 30-year-old housewife. 3 years ago, Ned, who worked at the same company and was 2 years older than me, confessed his feelings and we started dating. He was a kind and reliable colleague in the same department. Whenever I made a mistake, he would swoop in to help, and when he complimented me, he would do so with specifics. I was drawn to him, but he was also incredibly popular with the women at the company, so I had half given up on him. So when he confessed to me, I was over the moon. As we dated, I realized that not only was he kind and dependable, but he was also an incredibly sincere man. Plus, he surprised me by revealing that he had liked me since we first started at the company together. I was thrilled, and it made me like him even more, seeing how loyal he was. After 3 years of dating, the idea of marriage started to enter my mind. And then, amazingly, I found out I was pregnant with his child. I nervously revealed my pregnancy to him. "I'm not marrying you just because we're having a baby. I always intended to marry you. I'm going to love you and our child with everything I have. So let me propose to you properly." And he embraced me, saying, a few days later, "Will you marry me?" He gave me a ring and said. I was so touched by his sincerity and kindness that I started crying. "I look forward to our life together," I replied. Now that we had decided to get married, the three of us were going to find happiness together. After deciding to marry, we immediately had a family meeting. Although my parents were surprised that I was already pregnant, they said, "If Ned's the father, then I'm not worried. I can't wait for the baby to be born." They were happy about both the marriage and the pregnancy. "Next, we need to go greet Ned's parents." Yeah, you're right. I thought I saw a hint of unease on his face, but I figured it made sense given we were going to announce both our marriage and pregnancy. While he had brought me to my parents' house several times, this would be my first time visiting his family home. When we arrived to greet his parents, there was a luxury car parked out front. "Casey, I'm sorry. Looks like my brothers are here too." "No worries, I'll be fine." I had thought it would only be his parents, so my nervousness increased a bit. But I felt strongly that as long as I was with him, it would be okay. More than that, I hadn't known he had brothers. He rarely liked to talk about his family, so I tried not to pry. "Ned, I didn't know you had brothers." "Oh, I have a brother named Braden who's 3 years older than me. He works at a securities firm now and is a really successful brother that I'm proud of," he said, seeming to genuinely admire his brother. We were let into the house and sat across the table from his parents and Braden's family. He carefully chose his words as he told them about our marriage and pregnancy. As a heavy atmosphere settled over the room, we made our request together. "Ned, you need to be a proper father for Casey and the baby," Reynard said with a kind smile, softening the mood in the room and putting me at ease. "Ned, congratulations. Casey, if there's anything you don't understand, just ask." Braden and his wife also celebrated our news. I could tell he was relieved too. But that relief was short-lived as his mom Geneva's words froze the room again. "Braden had a proper wedding before having children. Braden does things properly, but Ned, you." Geneva's voice was low and cold. "I'm not marrying Casey just because we're having a baby. I always intended to marry her." "You can say whatever you want. A shotgun wedding is disgraceful." "Geneva, let's not talk like that. We just heard happy news about both their marriage and pregnancy," Reynard admonished Geneva, but the room remained chilled. However, the voice of Braden's son Roger broke through the icy atmosphere. "Mom, can I play video games?" "You were just playing, remember? Come on, let's go play with Mom in the other room." "Everyone, I'm so sorry about this." Caitlin, Braden's wife, opened the door and went into the next room with their son Roger. "Oh, that's right. Grandma bought Roger a new video game." Saying that, she left her seat and headed over to where he was. From beyond the door, we could hear Geneva's happy voice and Roger's delighted squeals. "Thanks, Grandma. I love you." "Geneva, thank you so much every single time. You just bought him a new toy recently too." "It's fine. I do it because I want to." Geneva's gentle tone was so different from the barbed one she used with us earlier. Hearing it made me relax a bit. Even if she didn't approve of the circumstances of our marriage, I had a feeling she would dote on our child once they were born. I hoped we could build a good relationship going forward. At the time, I naively thought that way. After finishing the greetings with both sets of parents, we quickly registered our marriage. About a year later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. We named our daughter Lola. "Casey, thank you. I'm going to work even harder." "Thank you. I'll do my best as a first-time mom too. Let's raise her with love together." We'll shower her with so much love. Now a father, Ned gently smiled and kissed both my forehead and Lola's. Oh, isn't she just precious? She's adorable. I'd forgive her for anything. The moment my parents met Lola, they couldn't help but smile from ear to ear as they took turns holding her. Ned's finally a dad, huh? Yeah. I'm still in awe. You know, Ned hardly ever takes a turn holding her. I'm always the one carrying her. Casey. Don't tell Huey and Christy. Ned, you're going to have a tough time when Lola gets a boyfriend in the future. Ned quickly retorted. Whoa, Christy! Don't make me think about that yet. Clearly not ready for that day to come. Ned, I have to admit, I was pretty shocked when you came to ask for Casey's hand in marriage. I'm sorry about that. Nah, that's just how fathers are. Thanks for giving me such an adorable granddaughter. The room was filled with heartfelt laughter, the love for Lola palpable in the air. Seeing my daughter so cherished, my heart swelled with a happiness I had never experienced before. When we brought Lola to meet Ned's parents, Reynard exclaimed, "This is my first time holding a baby girl," with delight. However, Geneva merely said, "I see," without making any attempt to hold Lola. I was surprised. The Geneva I had in mind, the one who had always spoken to Roger with a gentle voice and a smile, was not the same Geneva I saw now. I had assumed she would be just as overjoyed as my parents at Lola's birth. Honey, when did you say Braden and his family are coming? Geneva asked, averting her gaze from Lola and instead focusing on the calendar on the wall. Next Saturday, right? Well, it's nice that Ned, Casey, and Lola are here now. That's true. Casey, you must be exhausted. I'll go make some coffee, Geneva said before heading to the kitchen. Thank you. Not only did she not hold Lola, but she also brought up Braden and Roger. When Braden and his family weren't around, and it was just Ned and me visiting, Geneva seemed like a completely different person compared to when she was talking to Braden or Roger. Come to think of it, I recalled instances from our visits to Ned's parents' house before I gave birth. When it was just him and me, we were never offered coffee, but whenever Braden and his family were present, there were always delicious pastries from a fancy bakery and high-quality tea. I couldn't help but feel that Geneva treated Braden and Ned differently. Each time we left Ned's parents' house, a slight uneasiness lingered within me. But Ned never said anything, so I convinced myself that I was probably overthinking it. I shouldn't jump to conclusions and assume we weren't welcome. Ned had taught me back. Don't make assumptions when you're working. When we worked together. Even though this was the first time we brought Lola and Geneva didn't hold her, I told myself, she must be busy. When Lola gets as big as Roger, I'm sure she will dote on her too. I chose to reassure myself with those thoughts. My uneasiness persisted, but we continued to interact with Ned's family. Why don't we all have a Christmas party together? Let's do fireworks together during summer vacation. Every year, we would gather at Ned's parents' house for lively celebrations during events like Christmas and summer vacation, thanks to Reynard and Braden's invitations. Lola was still young, and with nursing and feeding her baby food, her needs were different from the adults, so I was constantly by her side. Ned was also actively involved with Lola and supported me, so I didn't find the time spent at his parents' house to be unpleasant. Geneva, on the other hand, remained attached to Braden's son, Roger. I assumed that since Lola was still small, Geneva gravitated towards Roger, who was more satisfying to feed. Although I still felt uneasy about the way she treated Ned and Braden differently, there was nothing definitive, so I continued to interact with Ned's family. Around the time Lola turned 2, Reynard suddenly passed away. Ned and Braden were both quite devastated by his sudden death from a heart attack, and they both seemed to be desperately holding back tears. I was also incredibly saddened by Reynard's passing. I want to live long enough to see Lola in her school uniform, no, in her wedding dress. He had loved Lola and had once said, However, with Ned trying not to cry, I couldn't allow myself to shed tears either, so I held back the tears that threatened to spill. Amidst everyone's grief, Geneva seemed to be the most distraught. After the doctor informed her of his death, Geneva spent the entire night crying, refusing to leave his cold body. Brayden had to take over as the representative for the funeral, as Ned was too grief-stricken to handle the role himself. After Reynard's funeral concluded, Geneva found herself living alone in the house she had once shared with her late husband. From the day after the funeral, she started frequently contacting Ned on his smartphone. He dutifully answered every call, listening attentively to her concerns and troubles. Her calls weren't just about venting. She also had daily requests for Ned, like picking up groceries, mailing letters, or changing light bulbs, tedious errands that never seemed to end. Despite his best efforts to meet her needs, the toll on Ned was evident. In just 1 month since the funeral, his face had become visibly worn and exhausted. Even during the couple's precious alone time after putting Lola to bed, her calls would interrupt, leading to fewer and fewer conversations between us. One evening at 10 p.m., Ned's phone rang with the familiar sound of Geneva's ringtone. "It's Mom again," Ned muttered, glancing at the caller ID on his smartphone screen. I swiftly took the phone from Ned's hand and answered it myself. "Geneva, I apologize for answering instead of Ned. He's currently working on some important documents for his job tomorrow. If it's all right with you, I'd be more than happy to listen and chat with you myself." "Casey? Is that you?" "Yes, it's me." For the next 30 minutes, I patiently listened to her array of complaints and stories. She started with grievances about the neighbors, eventually shifting to griping about various celebrities. Just when I thought she had exhausted all her complaints, Geneva launched into reminiscing about life with Reynard, praising Brayden's accomplishments, and offering unsolicited parenting advice. "Casey, I'm so sorry for burdening you with all my venting. It must have been quite an ordeal."
"It's okay, really. If anything, I should be apologizing for leaving you to handle Geneva all on your own until now. With preschool preparations settling down and Lola's health finally stabilizing, please let me take over handling Geneva's needs. Once Lola starts preschool, I should have even more free time."
"Thank you so much, Casey. Marrying you was truly the best decision I ever made. But please, don't push yourself too hard."
"I appreciate that. I'll do what I can manage. I know work has been hectic for you lately, and you were so excited about leading that big project. I really want to support you in that."
"Thank you, love. Tomorrow, I'll pick up a tart from your favorite bakery, and we can enjoy it together." From then on, I took over fielding Geneva's various requests to lighten Ned's load.
"Oh, by the way, Brayden and his family won't be able to visit this summer, so don't feel obligated to come either. I'm sure traveling with a young child in this heat would be quite a hassle,"
she mentioned one day when I dropped off some items she had requested. "I understand. We'll plan accordingly." In the past, whenever we visited the in-laws for major holidays like Christmas or summer vacation, Brayden and his wife would always join us. However, with Brayden's family unable to make it this year, Geneva was essentially uninviting us as well. While I appreciated her concern for Lola's well-being, this became a recurring pattern. Whenever Brayden's family couldn't attend a gathering,
"It's perfectly fine if you can't make it,"
she would reach out to let us know. I didn't dwell on it too much, figuring that she was going through a challenging time herself and probably wanted some space and quiet. Visiting family less often might be a nice break for us anyway, I thought. Then one day, as I often did, I found myself at her doorstep with the items she had requested. Her shopping lists were never simple or quick to fulfill, if I'm being honest. At least 3 times a month, she'd ask for things like specialty bread from a superstore an hour's drive away or clothing pickups from a department store. Today's mission had been to procure pastries from a bakery in the neighboring state. After dropping Lola off at preschool, I made the long journey to get them. It was exhausting, but I couldn't bring myself to refuse her requests. I couldn't imagine the pain of losing your beloved spouse, and I worried that if I said no, the burden would fall back on Ned.
Geneva, I brought the items you asked for.
Oh, you're here already? I'll be right there. As she opened the door to greet me, I caught a glimpse of 2 gift-wrapped boxes through the crack. That wrapping paper, it was from a toy store. Seeing those packages, a sudden realization hit me. Lola's birthday was just 2 weeks away. Could it be that Geneva had thoughtfully picked out birthday presents for her beloved granddaughter? I started to believe that Geneva was trying to care for Lola too. Geneva is also trying to take care of us, Lola. That made me happy.
Casey, keep the Sunday after next free, okay?
That day was the day before Lola's birthday. I became convinced that Geneva was trying to celebrate Lola. Of course. The 3 of us will be there. I was so happy that I told Ned exactly what had happened today when he got home from work. Geneva is trying to celebrate Lola. I'm sure she went and bought a present herself. So Ned, is the Sunday after next okay? Let's have a joint birthday party for Lola and Geneva, whose birthdays are close.
Yeah, let's do that.
Ned thought for a moment and agreed. And I've been asked a favor by Geneva for that day.
A favor?
And on Lola's 4th birthday, our family headed to my in-laws' house, the venue for today's birthday party, with Geneva's favorite fancy chocolate cake in hand. One more favor Geneva asked of us was to go buy this chocolate cake.
I want you to go buy the chocolate cake from that store. It's my birthday after all, so I want to eat something delicious.
The store Geneva specified was an 1.5-hour drive away. Moreover, the whole cakes are very popular and cannot be reserved, so there is always a long line every day. Anticipating this, we drove out early in the morning to buy the chocolate cake Geneva had specified. On Lola's actual birthday, we decided to save the character cake, and for the cake for Lola at the birthday party at my in-laws, I would bring one I made myself.
Excuse us for intruding.
Thanks, Ned, Casey. When we arrived at my in-laws' house, the Braden couple had already arrived, and my sister-in-law Caitlin greeted us. From the back, we could hear the cheerful voices of Geneva and Roger. Sorry we're late.
It's okay, it must have been a hassle. Going all the way to buy a chocolate cake.
Caitlin sympathized with us in a low voice, furrowing her brows. We and the Braden couple arranged the takeout we had bought on the large table, and the joint birthday party for Lola and Geneva began. In the center of the table, we set up the chocolate cake Geneva had specified that we had lined up early in the morning to buy, and the homemade cake for Lola. Inside the house, Braden was smiling softly.
Happy birthday, Lola and Mom,
Braden said before the toast. Thank you so much. And Geneva responded with a soft smile. As the meal began, Geneva sat right next to Roger, fussing over him attentively.
Would you like Grandma to get you some mashed potatoes? They're delicious.
Even though Roger was already in 3rd grade, Geneva kept treating him like a baby. Caitlin watched with a wry smile. Mom, Roger can eat by himself, you know. When Braden said that to Geneva, she replied with the same gentle smile.
Oh, it's fine. Grandchildren are precious, so let me dote on him. Speaking of which, Braden, you were already studying 2 grades ahead at this age, right? So I'm sure Roger takes after his dad and is gifted too.
Oh Mom, stop it. Braden's slightly embarrassed voice was followed by laughter from him and his wife. Seeing this, Lola looked like she wanted to say something, so I asked in a low voice.
What's the matter?
She whispered. When should I give it to her? In my ear. Actually, Lola had drawn a portrait of Geneva for today's birthday party.
Geneva? Lola has something she wants to give you, is that okay? Go on, Lola, give it to Grandma now.
At my encouragement, Lola took out the drawing paper with Geneva's portrait from her backpack, walked over to Geneva. Here you go. And shyly held it out saying, The paper Lola handed over was rolled up and tied with a ribbon. When the ribbon was untied, it revealed a portrait of Geneva with heart marks drawn on it. Neither Ned nor I had suggested the portrait as a present. Lola had spontaneously drawn it last night.
Do you think Grandma will like it?
Lola, who had come to show me the portrait she drew yesterday, had a face of pure enjoyment. I stroked Lola's head and replied,
Grandma will absolutely love it.
Everyone there was smiling as they watched the scene of Lola giving Geneva the present. But the next moment, I couldn't believe Geneva's reaction.
Yes, thank you. Will you put it over there?
She didn't even bother to untie the ribbon, let alone accept it, and just pointed her chin towards the corner of the room. The air in the room instantly froze at that sight.
Oh, that reminds me, Grandma had something she wanted to give too,
Geneva said in a spoiled voice amidst the frozen atmosphere. But Geneva seemed oblivious to the mood and went into the next room. She returned with a box wrapped in the toy store wrapping paper I had seen the other day, and handed it to Roger, Brayden, and Caitlin's son.
Here, didn't you say you wanted this, Roger? It's the latest popular video game. Grandma went and bought it just for you.
At Geneva's words and actions, the room erupted in commotion. I couldn't believe what was happening. Wasn't that supposed to be a present for Lola? Even Roger looked confused by Geneva's behavior, and Lola stood there with a face on the verge of tears. I silently went over to Lola and hugged her.
What's wrong? Look, it's a present from Grandma.
Geneva spoke to Roger in a spoiled voice, but the atmosphere remained frozen. However, Ned broke that silence.
Mom, Roger's birthday isn't for a while. What about Lola? Doesn't she get anything? She came up with the idea and prepared it all by herself for you, but you won't even accept it or look at it. What are you thinking?
It was the first time I heard anger in Ned's voice, when I had only ever heard his kind tone before. Geneva laughed mockingly, and then began spewing out the emotions she had suppressed until now, as if exploding.
Why should I have to spend money on your child? I only want to spend money on smart children. Brayden has always been smarter than you, ever since he was little. That's why I thought it was okay to spend as much money on him as I wanted. And I still feel the same way now. I want to do whatever I can for Brayden and his son Roger. But Ned, you've always been dumb, haven't you? Not only were you bad at studying, but you were also terrible at sports. I've always hated spending money on a fool like you. The money I spent on you has always been a waste, and it really frustrated me. I wanted to spend all the money and time I spent on you on Brayden instead. Spend money on the smart kid and don't spend money on the idiot. That's the smart way to use money.
I finally realized that the uneasiness I had been feeling about Geneva was correct. Even just her words now had me quite angry, but the words she spat out next made me so furious I thought I might lose it.
Celebrating an idiot's birthday is a waste of time.
Geneva said it as if she was spitting out poison.
Huh? What did you just say?
Is she saying that Lola is an idiot, and that celebrating the birthday of an idiot like her is a waste? I can't believe she planned the birthday party herself and is now saying this. So for her, today's birthday party wasn't a joint celebration with Lola, but a party she threw from the start just because she wanted to celebrate her own birthday. I looked over at Ned and saw that his body was trembling slightly too. I'm sure he can't contain his anger, I thought as I looked at Ned's face. But Ned did something that made me doubt my eyes.
You're right.
Ned suddenly smiled and agreed with her words. I was shocked by his words and attitude. Why isn't he saying anything back when she's saying this much to him? Not only is he not talking back, but he's agreeing with her words. But Ned's next action almost made me burst out laughing. Ned suddenly started eating the expensive whole Mont Blanc cake from the famous store that Geneva had been looking forward to eating the most. Scoop after scoop, he ate half of it in no time. While Ned was eating the cake, Geneva was trembling and shouting,
Hey! Stop that right now!
But Ned didn't stop eating. And just like that, he quickly devoured the entire expensive chocolate cake.
Ned, what are you doing? That was supposed to be my cake. Why are you eating it? Brayden, don't just stand there. Say something to this idiot. I've been looking forward to eating that for so long. This is too cruel.
She shot a pleading look at Brayden and his wife, but they and their son Roger were staring at her as if she was some unknown entity. Ned opened his mouth to address the screaming Geneva.
Celebrating an idiot's birthday is a waste of time, right? Some idiot eating this cake is even more of a waste, don't you think? So I did you a favor and ate it. Oh, and this whole birthday party was pointless to begin with. If it was just to celebrate your birthday, that is. How dare you speak to the mother who raised you like that?
Geneva retorted furiously in response to his cold words. I frowned, thinking how she could possibly call herself the mother who raised him after discriminating against him so much.
Raised me? You just used me as your personal punching bag to vent your frustrations. Whenever someone in the neighborhood insulted you or something you wanted to buy was sold out, you'd wait until Brayden wasn't around and hurl abuse at me. You've always compared me to Brayden and favored only him. But even though you discriminated between us, I never thought you'd do the same thing to my daughter. I knew you weren't an easy mom for me to deal with, but I truly believed you'd be a good grandma to Lola. That's the only reason I agreed to this birthday party. Me be a grandma to that child? Don't be ridiculous. The daughter of an idiot's son is bound to be an idiot too. Especially a child conceived from a shotgun wedding between an idiot son and an idiot woman. Of course she'll be an idiot. I have no desire to be a grandma to such a stupid child. Why would I ever say I want to see her?
She shouted, practically spitting with rage. I couldn't hide my disappointment. How could she say such terrible things? Not wanting Lola to hear any more of Geneva's words, I took her and Roger to a room in the back. Roger had an indescribable expression on his face. He simply stayed silent, gently stroking Lola's head as she cried. I'm sorry. You two stay here a little longer, okay? Saying that, I shut the door and went to stand next to Ned, who was confronting Geneva.
Hey, if that's how you feel, then why have you been summoning me over so much lately? You've had KC making calls and running errands too, but it's all been for trivial things. For someone who claims to want nothing to do with us, your behavior makes no sense. Menial tasks are a job for idiots, aren't they? I wouldn't dream of bothering Brayden and his family with such things. You should just shut up and do them, since menial labor is about all you're capable of.
Despite her insulting words, he remained calm. He simply gazed at Geneva with ice-cold eyes and murmured,
So that's your true feelings, huh? Of course it is. If Brayden and his family aren't coming, I have no desire to deal with you idiots. I thought it would be a good experience for Roger to look after a child beneath him, which is why I called you over. But if the three of them aren't coming, I don't even want to see your faces.
Geneva smirked arrogantly, crossing her arms. I held my aching head at the sight of her. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Brayden and his wife struck speechless by Geneva's words.
I see. Got it. KC, let's go home.
Saying that, Ned started gathering their things. Ned, I'm sorry, man. I had no idea things were like this. Brayden apologized to Ned, who nodded deeply.
It's all right, bro, it's not your fault. She's always been good at pulling this crap behind Dad's and your backs.
Ned smiled gently at a pale-faced Brayden.
That's right, Brayden. You have nothing to apologize for. You were the smart child, but that one over there was the idiot, and that's why things turned out this way.
As Geneva said that, Brayden turned to face her and spoke in a clipped tone.
Mom, no. I don't even want to call you Mom anymore. Caitlin, let's go home too. What are you saying, Brayden? Caitlin, don't just stand there. Say something.
Geneva appealed to Caitlin, Brayden's wife, for help, but she ignored her and stood up.
I'll pack this food up so you can take it home and eat it. It'd be a shame for such delicious food to go to waste in this environment. I bought some things Lola would like too. Make sure she eats a lot later.
She divided the remaining food into 2 boxes and handed them to me. During all this, she thoroughly ignored Geneva.
What are you two saying? After I've given you so much over the years, land, cars, money, you won't take my side? I was a naive idiot who believed you when you said you were giving Ned an equal share. It undoubtedly helped with household expenses, so I accepted it. But that wasn't the case at all, was it? I'll return as much of the same things as I can. And with that, I'm cutting ties with you. Brayden, have you lost your mind?
As Brayden and Geneva argued, I called out to Ned. Ned, I'm so sorry. I had no idea about any of this. If he had to endure a childhood like that, of course he wouldn't want to return to the home of a mother who insulted him.
You have nothing to apologize for, KC. She seemed to act normally around you, so I didn't think there was any need to say anything that would worry you. Mom's blatant favoritism of Brayden continued even after I became an adult, but I liked my brother, and once I moved out I was able to distance myself from her, so I didn't let it bother me.
Ned. Ned had been constantly sacrificing his own well-being for the sake of those around him. I could only imagine how painful it must have been for him. If anything, I'm the one who should be apologizing for not telling you about her sooner. I shook my head at Ned, who lowered his eyebrows looking apologetic. Ned's eyes hardened with resolve as he continued in a firm tone.
If you are going to treat our daughter the same way, that's a different story. I'm never bringing Lola or you to a place like this ever again. Let's go home, KC.
Brayden must have used some extremely harsh words, because Geneva was simply slumped over the living room table, sobbing. Taking advantage of the moment, Ned and I, along with Brayden and his wife, left my in-laws' home.
Roger, thank you for comforting Lola this whole time.
It's nothing. As we were leaving, I expressed my gratitude to the kind boy who had been consoling Lola. Today's events must have left a deep wound on his heart as well. After all, he found out the true nature of the grandma he had always thought was kind. He may only be in 3rd grade and still a child, but that doesn't mean he's ignorant or doesn't understand anything. He must realize that he alone was favored, and that it hurt Lola. But it's precisely because Roger hasn't done anything wrong himself that he seems at a loss for what to do. I couldn't help but hope that this wouldn't leave a lasting scar on his heart. When we got home and closed the front door, Lola finally spoke up. Dad, Mom, does Grandma hate me because I'm as stupid? Lola mumbled in a small voice, tears welling up in her eyes. We hastened to reassure her.
No, that's not true at all. You're not stupid, Lola. Dad and Mom love you so much,
Ned said, hugging Lola's small body close. That's right. You were born loved by everyone, Lola. You're turning 4 tomorrow. I made a reservation for your favorite cake, so let's go pick it up tomorrow. I embraced my beloved Lola, with Ned still holding her. My favorite cake?
That's right.
With strawberries on top.
Yep, it has strawberries.
Yay! When we first got home, Lola seemed shocked that Grandma hated her, but as Ned and I kept telling her,
we love you so much,
her smiles gradually started to return, which put me at ease. I had wanted to end my relationship with Geneva after what happened today, but a few days after the birthday party, a certain incident occurred. The doorbell rang violently.
Casey, I know you're in there. Won't you open up, please?
The doorbell kept ringing before 6 a.m. Rubbing my sleepy eyes, I looked at the door monitor and saw Geneva's figure on the screen.
What do you want? I'm telling you to open the door, so hurry up and come out.
Thinking the commotion at the door would bother the neighbors, I headed to the entryway. However, I absolutely did not want to let Geneva see Lola, so I dealt with her outside without letting her in the house.
You finally came out. Listen, I can't get in touch with Brayden and his family. I went to their house, but not only would they not let me in, they said terrible things to me.
Geneva had gone to beg Brayden to take back his declaration of cutting ties, but she was turned away. Apparently she was told,
"Don't ever come back. Roger says he doesn't want to see you either. Casey, won't you come with me? I want you to talk to Brayden and smooth things over for me. I'll forgive that idiot's son for what he's done if you do."
I was so dumbfounded I couldn't say anything. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to ask me for a favor after saying such horrible things to him and wounding Lola's heart. I took a deep breath and said to her,
"You have no idea how amazing Ned is. He's an indispensable person at his company. Not only is he kind and dependable, but he's also smart, looks out for his juniors, and is well liked by everyone." "Casey, what are you suddenly going on about?" "Never mind that, about Brayden and the others. He is incredibly important to me too. I have no desire to listen to the requests of someone who insults him and causes trouble for him. I hated all the phone calls and favors you asked of me. I couldn't care less about celebrity gossip, and it was a huge burden to do your shopping for you when your legs work just fine. But because you're Ned's parent and I thought you were suffering after just losing your husband, I tried to be there for you. But I won't do that anymore. I don't even want to talk to someone who insults Lola, Ned, and me. Please leave now." "Don't get so full of yourself, woman. Who do you think you're talking to?"
Just as I was about to retort that she was nothing more than a disruptive old hag, I heard the sound of the front door opening.
"What are you doing here?"
It was Ned who came out. He had taken time off work for the move, so he was home today. The truth is, after the birthday party, we had decided to move somewhere Geneva couldn't interfere with us at all. Ned, who had been making preparations for the move these past few days, stood in front of me and faced Geneva.
"You bastard! It's your fault Brayden and the others declared they were cutting ties with me. How are you going to make this right? Is that so? Then don't try to get involved with this bastard. Casey, come inside. I'm locking the door."
Saying that, Ned took my hand and locked the front door.
"Who do you think you're alive thanks to? Open up, you idiot!"
Geneva pounded on the front door, causing a commotion in front of the apartment. Her verbal abuse was getting more and more dangerous. The moment I picked up my smartphone to call the police, I heard the sound of a patrol car's siren in the distance. The sound gradually got louder until it stopped very close by. I immediately heard the voices of unfamiliar men and Geneva screaming. She must have been putting up quite a fight, because I could hear them trying to restrain her and even mention the word arrest. When Geneva's voice had completely faded away, the doorbell rang again. I expressed my thanks and apologies to the police officer who had rung the doorbell, and answered as much as I could about my relationship with Geneva. After that, my husband and I moved, and of course we didn't tell her our new address, so we successfully cut ties with her. Apparently Brayden and his wife returned an amount equal to the cars and gifts they had received, moved out, and returned the land. When they moved, they didn't provide their new address. Their last communication was,
"This should cover what we owe you."
Then Brayden, his wife, and everyone else changed their phone numbers. As a result, it seems Brayden and his family were also able to sever ties. In the end, Geneva, now alone, finally sought help from her siblings at this point. But no one is happy about a distant elderly relative suddenly showing up out of the blue, even if they are siblings. They were all around her age and had their hands full just taking care of themselves. Geneva barged in, acting all high and mighty, expecting them to take care of her and trying to order around her siblings' sons, wives, and grandchildren who lived with them.
Please, just go into a nursing home.
They almost kicked her out, saying. But Geneva refused to change her attitude, insisting it had to be a high-end facility with lots of amenities. The reason she could be so pushy was because she was the eldest daughter. Geneva, who had inherited a considerable sum from her deceased parents, plus the inheritance from Reynard, had more funds than anyone else. Even so, Geneva looked down on everyone except Braden as fools. She hated spending money and pressured her siblings,
You're my younger siblings, so you all should take care of me,
who had inherited the same amount, saying. In the end, Geneva apparently got into the high-end facility she wanted. But to the kinds of people who could afford such a high-end facility, she was an exceedingly vulgar woman they wanted nothing to do with. As a result, the other residents avoided her, and the staff apparently became her outlet. She complained in nasty ways about trivial matters, making herself hated by everyone and treated as a problem resident. But that quickly came to an end too. With no one willing to interact with her, and no family, siblings, or relatives ever coming to visit, her dementia progressed rapidly. She got to the point where she didn't even know who she was or where she was, which made her easier to deal with in a way. After that, Geneva's siblings changed the payment method so it was automatically deducted from Geneva's assets rather than paid by them. As long as she has money, it seems Geneva is living happily in the high-end facility. Today too, Geneva can't even remember Braden, who was so important to her, and has reached a state where she simply spends all day in bed. As for Ned, after completely cutting ties with Geneva, he quickly rose through the ranks at work. Perhaps because he was freed from Geneva's curse of calling him a child who can't do anything and a foolish man, his complexion visibly improved. He was full of motivation, and with his innate character, he was able to work together with his team to achieve even better results. Geneva's hold on Ned must have been a terrible curse for him. I felt relieved to see Ned in good spirits. And now, I have a baby in my belly.
Lola, you're going to be a big sister soon.
Yeah. I can't wait.
All right? Dad's going to work even harder. You're working hard enough as it is. Don't overdo it, okay?
We moved to an even more spacious high-rise apartment for the second time, thinking about our growing family. After the birthday party incident, we grew closer to Braden's family. I thought they might cut ties with us too, but to Ned, Braden is his precious brother. Now that Geneva is gone, he's happy he can have an honest relationship with him. Roger has become a great older brother, and he gets along well with Lola too. Once Caitlin and I have recovered from giving birth, we're planning a big family trip together. The rich husband and a mansion are mine. I'll introduce you to my ex-boyfriend as a thank you. Amelia leaned in close to me and whispered in my ear. Riches and mansions don't suit plain Olivia. Just get out. I had been holding my breath without realizing, causing my chest to feel tight. Breathing heavily through my shoulders.
Get out?
My breathing was so erratic I couldn't speak properly. Amelia laughed heartily at this.
Oh no, Olivia, don't cry.
Sorry, Olivia. But I decided to live my life with Amelia. Facing the possibility of a hyperventilation attack, Matthew ruthlessly presented me with the divorce papers. I was betrayed by both my husband and my sister. Receiving them made the pain worse, and I crouched down, clutching my stomach. I could acutely feel Amelia and Matthew's stares. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Lifting my face, which had been downcast, I unleashed the laughter I had been suppressing in a huge explosion. There's no way I was going to cry. The ones who'll be crying and screaming from now on are Amelia and Matthew. I am Olivia, a housewife in her 40s. I recently got married for the second time. My husband's name is Matthew. He's a man 2 years my senior. He was a tenant in the apartment I own. While cleaning the apartment, "Thanks for your hard work as always," he would greet me. Gradually, we started exchanging small talk and it developed into a relationship.
I thought you were just a part-time cleaning lady.
I'm also in my 40s. It's not surprising he thought that, given my lack of fashion sense and simply tying my black hair back.
I was really surprised when I found out you were the landlord.
Matthew, while working, was mostly engaged in his hobby of investing, and before he knew it, he had missed his chance to marry. I also had a bit of a hobby in investing, and we hit it off. Naturally, this led to marriage. Matthew would praise anything related to my investment talks as amazing. Not only that, but when I made simple dishes, he would be delighted and say they were delicious, and when I massaged his shoulders, he seemed to melt with joy. He's older but somewhat childish and pure at heart. Since I'm not at the age to want to wear a wedding dress for the second time, I felt bad for Matthew, who was marrying for the first time, so we didn't have a wedding. Instead, our new home was a high-rise apartment that Matthew wanted.
Wow, what a view! Even though this high-rise is actually on the 5th floor.
Matthew looked over the city with sparkling eyes.
It's luxurious for just the two of us, isn't it? How many times bigger is it than the apartment I was living in?
I had never imagined that Matthew's honest character, who was so excited at the time, would change to the exact opposite. The trigger was inviting Matthew's colleague to our home. Wow, amazing. His colleague, Smith, stood frozen in the middle of the room, his mouth agape.
This is Matthew's place? It's like a hotel. I've never stayed in such a fancy hotel.
Surprised?
It's really something, isn't it?
Urged by a proud Matthew, Smith hesitantly took a seat on the leather sofa.
This was given to me by my wife to bring.
Handed cookies by Smith. Matthew showed a troubled smile.
Thanks. These are the cookies that sell for about $10 at the supermarket service counter, right?
There was no need for him to say it in such a snide manner. Smith shrank back, feeling uncomfortable.
Thank you for the cookies. I really love them.
I tried to change the atmosphere of the place and offered Smith a cup of coffee with a bright smile.
Thank you.
Smith took a sip of the coffee, looking relieved.
All this time you wouldn't even go out for drinks, and your lunch was either instant ramen or sandwiches with discount stickers. You wouldn't even buy a drink from a vending machine. You really never spent money, did you? So I couldn't believe it when you suddenly got a high-rise apartment right after getting married.
You're amazing, man.
Well, yeah.
Matthew raised his chin and puffed out his chest.
Who were those guys calling me a loser who couldn't get married? There's no one at the company making fun of me now, right?
My bad.
Your wife is lucky.
Matthew and Smith were impressed. I was a bit concerned about Matthew's attitude, but maybe this is normal for conversations between men. Smith then lowered his voice.
And added, the house is luxurious, but your wife is plain. That's because my wife didn't lose to you. I'm not only interested in cute girls like you. It's normal for a guy in his 40s to marry a woman in her 40s, right? A cute wife in her 20s is something out of a manga.
I couldn't believe my ears. Both of them laughed as if they meant no harm.
That's right. This high-rise has everything, even a gym and a fancy bar, not like the cheap bars you guys go to. I'll treat you to some drinks.
With that, Matthew and Smith headed to the mansion's bar. In front of his colleague, Matthew had become overly confident. Just for today. Only for now. But from that day on, Matthew started to act more arrogantly.
Ah, you went to that cheap supermarket again, didn't you? We're supposed to be upscale, you know. It's embarrassing, so stop it.
Matthew frowned unhappily as he checked my purchases and receipts. What I hated the most was Matthew's evening drinks. He always sat by the window, drinking while looking down. The cars look like toys. And the people are so tiny. They don't realize they're being looked down upon, working down there. Matthew had completely changed. Buying discounted vegetables at the cheap supermarket and making stew together felt like a distant memory. I was beginning to harbor uneasy feelings toward Matthew. Then one day, when I came home, I saw a pair of high heels I didn't recognize in the entrance. I swallowed hard. Could it be that Matthew brought another woman home? Listening closely, I could hear laughter from a man and a woman coming from the living room. My palms were sweaty even though it wasn't hot. I tiptoed down the hallway like a thief. Peeking quietly into the living room, a woman with curly hair noticed me and raised her hand. Ah, Olivia. Welcome back.
Eh?
Sis? The tension I had been feeling instantly dissolved. The one drinking with Matthew was my sister, Amelia. The relief was short-lived as questions began to arise. I had told Mom about the marriage, but not about our new home. Amelia must have heard about the marriage from Mom, but I never expected her to just show up at our house.
If you're married, you should have told me. I'm your sister, Olivia. Let me at least celebrate your marriage.
Amelia, already drunk, leaned on Matthew's shoulder. It seems that Matthew had told Mom about our new home during the marriage introduction. I didn't want to tell. I had already warned Matthew that my family and I weren't on good terms. But when your future mother-in-law asks, "Where will you live?" it's natural to answer honestly. However, "Where will you live?" wasn't just small talk from Mom. She probably just wanted something to look down on me for. They must have laughed behind my back, thinking the high-rise apartment story was a huge lie.
No, I was surprised. To think you actually live in a high-rise. It's so grand. It feels spacious and luxurious, completely different from our old family apartment.
Well, yeah. This is high-rise quality for you.
Wow, I'm jealous. Olivia, you're amazing.
Even as she spoke, Amelia kept touching Matthew's arms and thighs. Matthew's smile grew wider with the blatant body contact.
Olivia, you've come a long way from being a fast food wife.
Matthew, making a face like a monkey, suddenly tilted his head. Eh? Matthew, didn't you know? Olivia's ex-husband worked part-time at a fast food place. Olivia used to go there a lot. Meeting there, it's not like they were high schoolers, right? Working in fast food, it's like a high school job. He was living off you, huh? Really? Mom and I were so worried, we were against the marriage. But I liked him, I wanted to marry him. We registered our marriage without telling anyone and then went no contact. They laughed and chugged their beers. My ex-husband, Stephen, being used as a topic for their amusement, made my head throb. I wanted to stop the conversation right now, but my body wouldn't move. And then, 5 or 6 years into the marriage, that husband died of illness. Poor Olivia. It's because she didn't listen to our advice and married some weird guy that she got her comeuppance. At that moment, I swung my right hand high. I snapped back to reality at Amelia's scream. My palm was trembling above Amelia's head.
Scary! Were you about to hit me just now?
Amelia, who had been glaring, blinked slowly. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, she became weak and leaned limply towards Matthew. Amelia was scared. Amelia's whiny voice sent shivers down my spine.
Olivia! What were you about to do to your own family?
Matthew yelled at me, and I clenched my trembling palms. I'm sorry, but it's just that my sister...
Shut up! Are you trying to make excuses after making your own sister cry? I thought you were a kind woman. I was mistaken.
A sob escaped from Amelia, her mouth revealing white teeth. Her overly red, vulgar lips were definitely smiling. Matthew gently stroked her messy curls, oblivious to the fact that the woman in his arms was smiling. But they were speaking ill of Stephen, who's passed away.
Eh? Are you still hung up on your ex-husband?
Matthew refused to listen to me. It was the moment a complete rift formed between us as a couple. It's always like this. My family looks down on me and makes me the butt of their jokes. That's why I wanted to keep my distance. Amelia, who was always considered more attractive. While I was told, don't worry. You can have plastic surgery when you grow up. While Amelia enjoyed a lively student life with fashion and dating, I focused on my studies. I did so because Mom would praise me for getting 100 on a test. But after scoring 103 times in a row, it became expected, and I was scolded for missing even a single point. Olivia is so diligent with her studies. I'm proud to have such a smart sister. I bragged to my friends that you're studying hard now to save up for your future plastic surgery. I was often ridiculed by Amelia, who was not good at studies but led a glamorous life. Even now as an adult, do I have to be laughed at by my family? I'm not even allowed to defend Stephen, who has passed away. Worse, Matthew joined in laughing and blaming me, which was unbearably frustrating. A week has passed since then, but our marital relationship has only deteriorated. Matthew, who had been so fond of living in the high-rise, has been coming home late. He probably doesn't want to see me. He avoids our bedroom and languidly secludes himself in another room. In this large house, we barely feel each other's presence. It feels like the emotional distance between us is growing. I can't let this continue. With that resolve, I approached Matthew the next day after he returned from work. Matthew. It's cold today. How about we have some stew together? Matthew, who was about to head straight to his room, glanced at the dining table. Warm steam rose from the pot, spreading a comforting aroma. Ha. His response was cold. I don't want to eat something as common as stew. If you want to please me, serve something like caviar or foie gras. Despite having never eaten them, Matthew shrugged his shoulders in disgust. Then he looked me up and down and let out a heavy sigh. It's not you. My mistake. With those words, Matthew disappeared into his room. My mistake. The meaning of those words would soon become painfully clear.
Welcome back.
One day, I was greeted by Amelia in the entrance. She was in an unusually good mood, smiling brightly. Behind her was Matthew, scratching his head with a sarcastic smile. Amelia and Matthew looked happy, embarrassed, and seemed hesitant to speak up.
What's wrong? Were you drinking and talking bad about me or Stephen again? No, you're being paranoid.
As I went to take off my shoes.
Ah, wait.
Amelia stopped me.
I'm sorry, but could you not enter this house anymore?
Eh?
That, you know, right?
Matthew.
Eh? Oh, yeah, Amelia, you say it.
Like a bashful new couple, Amelia and Matthew were awkwardly hesitant.
You see, we've fallen in love.
Huh?
I responded flatly to Amelia's embarrassed admission. Amelia is not a high school student. She's a woman in her 40s with laugh lines. Somehow, I felt embarrassed.
Olivia, you still like your previous husband, right? I was hurt. So it's only natural for me to change my heart to Amelia, right?
Huh?
I nodded, but couldn't comprehend.
Olivia, I'm really sorry.
Her apology lacked any genuine emotion. Amelia clasped her hands in front of her chest, pouted her lips, and tilted her head slightly. She leaned in close and whispered in my ear,
"The rich husband and mansion are mine. I'll introduce you to my ex-boyfriend as a thank you."
The overpowering scent of a strong toilet air freshener gave me a headache. Her bright red lips barely touched my ear, causing goosebumps to spread uncontrollably.
It's okay, relax. That ex-boyfriend is also part-time. You likes those kind of losers, right? Riches and mansions don't suit plain Olivia. Just get out.
With her foul breath on me, Amelia finally moved away. I was completely frozen. Amelia crossed her arms with satisfaction, puffing out her chest.
"Get out?"
I had unconsciously held my breath, making my chest hurt. Breathing heavily through my shoulders.
"Get out?"
My breathing was so erratic I couldn't speak properly. Amelia laughed loudly at this.
"No, Olivia, don't cry. Poor Olivia."
"Sorry, Olivia.
But I've already decided to live my life with Amelia."
As I was on the verge of hyperventilation, Matthew ruthlessly thrust the completed divorce papers at me. Receiving them made me even more distressed, and I crouched down, clutching my stomach. I could acutely feel Amelia and Matthew's stares. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Raising my face, which had been downcast, I let out the laughter I had been suppressing in a huge explosion.
"What have you been saying this whole time? Why do I have to leave?"
My sudden burst of laughter must have seemed abnormal. Amelia distorted her face and took a step back.
"But all the property is in my name?"
I said while wiping the tears from the corner of my eye. Amelia furrowed her brows in confusion, and Matthew gave a slight smile.
"Huh? Do you understand what being handed those divorce papers means? Matthew and Olivia are getting a divorce. You're the unwanted one here, so disappear."
My rambling must have seemed like the talk of someone gone mad. Amelia's scent already filled the house. Looking down at her feet, I saw stockings discarded on the living room floor. I realized there was no place for me here anymore. Clinging to a house steeped in Amelia's scent seemed foolish.
"Why don't we just move to another house?" "No way. I've really taken to this high-rise apartment."
Matthew coaxed Amelia with a relaxed smile. Whatever they were plotting, it was no longer my concern.
"Fine. I'll leave, do as you please,"
Amelia declared confidently with a smirk.
"Appreciate your understanding. So, Matthew and I will live in this high-rise apartment. Don't complain later, okay?"
"Yes, be happy." Then I packed my belongings into a single Boston bag and left the room where I was supposed to enjoy a happy married life with Matthew. Days later, returning from the grocery store, I bumped into Amelia and Matthew at the mansion's entrance.
"You're still lurking around the mansion?"
"Creepy. Just leave already."
You don't have anywhere to go, so you're sleeping in the entrance? Wow, how pitiful."
Having a homeless person at the entrance of a luxury high-rise is just unacceptable.
They pitted me based on their own assumptions. I ignored them and headed for the elevator.
"What? Want to pick up your stuff? No way. The room will get polluted if drab, poor Olivia enters. We'll send your stuff COD, just don't enter my house." "Where should we send it? To some park or a back alley?"
Amelia and Matthew followed me like fish trailing behind, as I walked briskly. Matthew hastily stopped me just as I was about to press the elevator button.
Hey, Olivia, that's the elevator for the upper floors, right? Are you out of your mind?
Did Matthew dumping you shock you into senility?
Ah, so leaving the demented old person was a good decision. I don't want to deal with caregiving.
I pressed the elevator button without heeding them.
Hey, stop messing around, homeless. It's disrespectful to the upper floor's elite.
As I entered the elevator, Amelia and Matthew exchanged shocked looks and squeezed in just before the doors closed. Matthew was excited as if he was on an amusement park ride, experiencing the high-floor elevator for the first time. The elevator stopped at the top floor.
Hey, this is not good. Homeless aren't supposed to be here. Stop it.
We don't want to anger the real elite, right? I don't know you.
Despite their attempts to hold me back, Amelia and Matthew curiously looked around. I continued to ignore them and opened the door to the room in front of me.
Ah! How dare you enter someone's home?
I glanced at them dismissively before entering the room. Matthew, panicking, grabbed the door just before it closed. He slowly pulled the door open and stepped into the room on the top floor of the high-rise apartment.
Hey, Olivia.
What do we do? Shall we go in too? After hesitating at the entrance for a while, the two of them tiptoed down the hallway.
Wow!
Upon entering the living room, Matthew couldn't help but exclaim. The room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. It was completely different from the one on the 5th floor.
Why do you?
Sitting comfortably on the sofa, I finally met Amelia and Matthew's gaze.
Why?
Because this is my house. Amelia and Matthew's mouths hung open in shock, as if their jaws might drop. I was forced out of the house suddenly, so I had no choice but to move to this room on the top floor. Oh, right. You were going to send the remaining stuff COD, weren't you? Please send it to this room. The two of them looked like they were about to scream, but couldn't even open their mouths.
Why?
Because it's my house. How many more times do they want me to say this is my house?
I said all the properties were mine, didn't I? The room you're living in and this room, they're all mine. Huh? Why? I didn't know you owned the top floor too. Wasn't the best place you had that room on the 5th floor? Did you trick me?
Matthew, who had lived in my apartment until we got married, had asked if I owned any better properties, wanting to live in the best one. It's not that I tricked you. The person living on this top floor just moved out recently.
No way. The top floor? Me on the 5th and Olivia on the top? That's a lie, don't mess with me. You of all people.
Matthew scratched his head in frustration, his mouth twisting.
Amelia, are we okay with this misunderstanding? Are we okay with being below Olivia? Let's move to a higher-rise apartment. Yeah, let's move, Matthew. To a higher-rise apartment?
The two of them held hands, their eyes sparkling with visions of a splendid future.
Yeah. So, Amelia, do you have an apartment higher than this?
Huh? No, of course not.
Too bad. Then we'll just have to buy or rent one. I'll leave it to you, Amelia.
Huh? What?
The previous sparkle vanished as the two of them stood frozen, puzzled.
Hey, I've been a bit confused. What do you mean Olivia owns the house? This is really Olivia's place?
Amelia asked with a forced smile. Yeah, sort of.
Olivia of all people, so presumptuous. You studied hard to save money for plastic surgery, but in the end, you didn't spend it on surgery but bought a high-rise apartment instead?
No, that's not it.
I get it. It's a loan, right? With a loan, you can afford anything expensive. Don't scare me like that.
Amelia convinced herself, nodding with her arms crossed.
But you can't compete with Matthew, can you? He owns several rooms on the second and third floors of this high-rise, not to mention other lands and apartments. Olivia, you're in a different league.
Matthew, looking uncomfortable, avoided eye contact and remained silent.
But that's mine too. Because this entire high-rise building is owned by me.
Huh? But Matthew said it was his.
Amelia's desperate gaze turned to Matthew, who was visibly pale and distressed.
Matthew, you're lying, right?
Well, it's not exactly mine, it's ours as a couple.
I clarified for Matthew, who was fumbling for words.
It seems Matthew boasted to you about properties and lands under my name as if they were his own.
Pathetic man.
Lies, lies.
The one who lied was Matthew. Amelia collapsed on the spot, overwhelmed by shock.
Olivia, of all people, this can't be true.
Matthew, with an awkward smile, sorry, apologized. His straightforward apology hardly registered with the dazed Amelia. Unable to bear the heavy atmosphere any longer, Matthew broke into a forced laugh. Sorry. I own nothing. But my feelings for Amelia are real. I'll always be there to support Amelia.
Matthew.
Amelia's cheeks flushed slightly. Money or love? Surely that couldn't be what mattered.
So, how much does Amelia own?
Huh? Own what?
Like lands or apartments.
What? I don't own anything like that.
Why?
Amelia and Matthew furrowed and raised their eyebrows, displaying a pitiful confusion.
Amelia is more loved by the parents than Olivia, so it's natural she'd be favored, right? What about the apartment you inherited from Dad?
Inheritance? What are you talking about?
Did you somehow lose all the apartments you inherited? What are you even talking about?
Amelia yelled, and finally, the two fell silent. They made funny faces at each other, opening their eyes wide, twisting their mouths, and baring their teeth as if in a staring contest.
Ha ha ha.
I lost this staring contest.
Matthew, seems like you misunderstood. The reason I own so many apartments and lands is indeed due to inheritance. You can't buy 1 or 2 high-rise buildings just by studying hard. But it's not from Dad's inheritance.
Amelia and Matthew swallowed hard.
It's inherited from Stephen.
Amelia looked puzzled for a moment, but then burst out laughing.
Stephen, the part-time fast food worker?
That's right. But he wasn't a part-timer.
I had explained to my family when I decided to marry Stephen. It's true we met at a fast food restaurant, but Stephen was not a part-timer there. He owned the land on which the fast food restaurant stood. It was a mystery how they ever interpreted it as him being a part-timer. No matter how much I corrected them.
Yeah, part-timer in your prime years.
They laughed.
Stephen was a rich landowner with wealth passed down through generations.
I simplified it for Amelia, whose eyes nearly popped out.
He was rich enough to live off his wealth without ever working at a fast food joint.
The real Stephen worked earnestly, and I didn't quit my job after marrying him either. We didn't live in leisure, but that's why the wealth continued to be preserved.
Furthermore, I learned to invest and nearly doubled the fortune I inherited from Stephen.
Matthew's lips trembled slightly.
I did say it was inherited, but why from an ex-husband? I thought it was from your dad. Inheritance usually comes from parents, right? So, I thought Amelia had a vast fortune. If both were wealthy, choosing the better-looking Amelia over plain Olivia seemed natural. You tricked me, didn't you?
Matthew lamented weakly. Of course, I had mentioned inheriting from my late husband. Why do those who make assumptions jump to conclusions so hastily?
I didn't know that. I wasn't told.
I never bragged about being wealthy, but I insisted Stephen wasn't a part-timer. It was only Amelia's ears and brain that had shut down.
Olivia of all people, wealthy? Olivia of all people, owning a high-rise? Unacceptable.
Some people won't get it unless you spell it out for them.
Sorry for being someone like me who owns real estate worth $190 million. Below Amelia, yet living leisurely above her.
Amelia covered her head with both hands and slumped to the floor, tears streaming down her face without words. I walked to the window and looked outside. Matthew, want to see the view too? A view you won't see for the rest of your life, so take a good look. Matthew came over to me. Then, unbelievably, he put his arm around my shoulder.
Sorry. My bad. I got swayed because Amelia seemed to have a lot of money. Think about it. Do you really think I'd like an old woman like Amelia? Gross.
Matthew shifted his gaze to the vast view outside the big window. People look like toys. No, more like trash. I placed my hand over Matthew's on my shoulder. Then he squeezed my hand and smiled gently. Olivia, I love you. Matthew, I don't love you.
Eh?
I shook off Matthew's hand roughly.
A man who cheats and abandons his newlywed wife, like you, is truly trash. By the way, the divorce papers you unilaterally handed me that day have been submitted. Enjoyed the top floor view? It's time for trash to go back where it belongs.
With that said, Matthew froze, maintaining the most handsome, determined face he'd ever shown. Then, Amelia and Matthew continued to live on the 5th floor of the high-rise apartment for a while. Given how much Matthew ridiculed Amelia, they obviously weren't living together harmoniously. It was simply that neither of them wanted to give up living there. One day, they were clearly lying in wait at the apartment's entrance. As soon as they saw me, they tripped over themselves rushing over.
Olivia! Finally found you!
Hey, what's this about? I didn't need to look at the paper they showed to know what it was. It's the rent bill. You can read, can't you?
So, why? You're trying to take money from me?
Of course. Why would you think you can live here for free? I replied calmly, and Amelia sidled up. You're so cold. We're family, right? You can kick out this trash man, but as family, I have the right to live here for free, right? No. Have you forgotten what you did? Stealing your sister's husband and destroying another family. What family are you talking about? I don't have a family. Amelia weakly muttered. Olivia. I was jealous of Olivia looking so happy. Honestly, I'm in a lot of trouble. Amelia started crying, haltingly explaining her difficult situation. My ex-boyfriend was part-time but spent quite well. When I asked, he said he managed his credit cards well. You know, if you use revolving credit, you only need to pay $100 next month for a $1,000 expenditure the previous month. Sounds great, right? But Amelia sniffled in frustration. Before I knew it, I was buying things for my ex-boyfriend, and by the time the credit limit was maxed out, he had dumped me. I'm so pitiful, right? I have no money, so let me stay in this high-rise apartment. That was the ex-boyfriend she had intended to introduce to me. So, you got dumped. But it's okay. You have Matthew. Maybe your ex and Matthew are similar. Both equally trash. I heard Matthew was into investing, but he never shared details, only asked about mine. No wonder he couldn't. Investing in horse races and spending most of his salary on it. Not all wealthy people flaunt their money. Stephen and I were very modest and didn't waste money needlessly. I thought Matthew was the same before marriage. When our relationship soured, finding a pocket full of betting tickets almost made me faint.
Live happily with Matthew you took from me. Oh, and don't forget to pay the rent by tomorrow. That's impossible. If you can't pay, please leave.
Despite my reasonable response, Amelia cried out loud.
But we're family.
And Matthew clung to my feet.
I love you, Olivia.
Proclaiming his love. This high-rise apartment felt more like a childcare center. It wasn't my job to discipline these selfish children. Eventually, Amelia and Matthew couldn't continue to live in the high-rise and had to leave. I moved too, so there's no more worry about being ambushed by them. Though the top floor of the high-rise was nice, it never felt quite like me.
Today's view is great.
I leaned out from my second-floor balcony. In front of me stretched the endless sea. My life in the city felt like being swallowed by a sea of dark buildings. Away from the city, I changed both my residence and job, starting anew. Neighbors share vegetables and seafood. I have congenial colleagues at work. Life doesn't necessarily need parents, siblings, or a spouse. It's enough to spend time with people you like. Even without a family, I'm perfectly happy alone.
Come to think of it, Stephen also loved the sea.
I'm happily single. Yet, in my heart, Stephen's smiling face is always with me. I'm alone but not lonely.
Don't leave the TV on, and either turn off the lights in the living room or your room.
Got it. I'll make sure to save electricity. I left the house to go shopping far away. Whether leaving or staying at home, we as a family are committed to saving energy, like remembering to turn off lights and setting the air conditioner to the right temperature. Today, like always, we reminded each other in the family, and I went out. However, a few hours later when I returned, our dear home had completely changed.
Since you love saving so much, I'll save electricity for you.
The sound that echoed maliciously was Amelia's laughter. Amelia, who sneaked in secretly, had turned off our home's breaker, causing a major problem. The reason she did this? My name is Emma. At 29, I married Liam, my same-aged partner, and moved into my in-laws' house. My mother-in-law had already passed away, and my father-in-law, James, who has a respiratory illness, was living alone. Persuaded by my concerned husband, I started living there while continuing my job. In the in-laws' house, there was also the unmarried Amelia, but we never really got along. James is calm and kind, much like my husband. In contrast, his sister Amelia is temperamental and volatile. Being straightforward, I often clashed with her, and being a few years older, I was somehow managing to keep her in check. Excluding her, it was a peaceful life. But within half a year, James's illness worsened. He needed an oxygen machine even to stay at home. Both Amelia and I were working, so there was no one to help James during the day. We should have arranged for him to live in a care facility, but James refused to leave the house filled with memories of his wife. Consulting with my husband, we concluded it would be cruel to force James to move. So, we hired a caregiver, but that led to more problems. Already not getting along with me, Amelia disliked strangers entering her home and started harassing the caregiver. Invisibly to us, she was abusive and sarcastic, obstructing the work, and repeatedly complained to the agency, saying they couldn't be trusted with her father. By the time we realized the cause, multiple caregivers had quit, and the agency told us they couldn't send anyone new. What do we do now? Other agencies have refused us too.
We must be blacklisted, damn it, all because of Amelia.
Known as a troublesome household, we could no longer hope for a caregiver. We had to think of a solution with a sigh. Amelia, always self-centered, had isolated herself from the family. My husband, as her brother, tried to correct her, but it only led to fierce arguments, and he eventually told her to move out and live independently. But Amelia, angered by such reprimands, started complaining to me, as I was less intimidating than her brother.
You're a daughter-in-law now, so you should take care of him, Emma. Liam can't quit his job, being a man, but you're different.
Overheard by my husband, this sparked another argument. This situation didn't allow James to rest and recover peacefully. I didn't want to give in to Amelia's demands, but I couldn't just stand by either. Feeling indebted to James, who had tried to make me feel at home despite his illness, I decided,
I'll quit my job and take care of James. I'll start learning about caregiving bit by bit. After all, James is family to me too.
When I finally decided to resign for caregiving, James and my husband thanked me with tears. It was a real challenge learning about caregiving from scratch, but James always kindly encouraged me, despite my struggles. The only thing that didn't change was Amelia. She neither moved out nor helped with the housework or caregiving. On her days off, she would disappear, presumably to hang out. Even though I had more time, I was busy with James and studying for caregiving. My husband and I shared household chores, but whenever something was missed, Amelia was quick to complain.
Oh, Emma decided to take on both caregiving and housework, right? You like doing everything yourself, don't you?
If I even slightly talked back, she would retaliate unpleasantly. She kept harassing me like this, but was always found out and scolded by my husband and others. Every time, she would play the victim, saying, James is too kind to say anything, so I'm doing it for him. Naturally, things didn't improve, and her constant interference slowed down my household tasks, quickly piling up stress. I'm truly grateful to the caregivers who managed to smile and care for James despite her meddling. Not just me, but James and the others were fed up with Amelia's persistent attitude. However, one day, while my husband and I were secretly discussing how to encourage her independence, she announced,
I got engaged and I'm moving out. Goodbye, Dad. I'll come back to visit sometimes.
With that, Amelia left the house obediently. We were surprised, but with her stormy presence gone, the house's atmosphere stabilized. James was aging and his condition was a concern, so there were talks of moving him to a care facility, but as I got accustomed to caregiving, we decided to continue with home care. Amelia, now living at her fiancé's place, often returned home.
I bet there'll be leftovers from dinner tonight. Put them in a Tupperware, I'll take them with me.
Apparently, she was relying on our leftovers to avoid cooking for her fiancé. Her selfishness remained, treating me like a housemaid as before.
Amelia, don't order Emma around without helping yourself.
Yeah, sorry Emma.
That's enough, right?
Hurry up with the dinner. Even when scolded by James, she would dismiss it with an indifferent attitude. Honestly, the amount of food I had to prepare didn't change much from before she left, so that wasn't really an issue. Rather, the problem was the food and utility costs. Although Amelia had moved out and stopped contributing financially, her frequent returns and unrestrained behavior strained our budget. Moreover, she had no sense of saving electricity or money.
Amelia, turn off the lights in unused rooms. Can I go ahead if you're not using the shower?
Amelia, lying on the couch with her back to the still-on TV, seemed to be playing games on her mobile phone. She had left the lights on in the bathroom and changing room, indicating she'd take a shower, but showed no signs of moving. The unnecessary electricity use and her lingering were holding everyone back. When I asked her to decide between gaming or showering, Amelia glared at me angrily. "Don't tell me what to do. I was just about to go. You always nag about saving and cutting costs, but it hardly makes a difference." "You're so petty, Auntie." "What did you just call me?" "I called you Emma. Don't pretend you heard wrong and get mad," she retorted, even as James scolded her. While saying this, Amelia finally turned off the TV and headed to the changing room. She always complained, but at least she listened to what was said. However, having worked for years and having a fiancé, her mindset remained that of a rebellious child. I had stopped expecting her to act her age. Though I didn't mind it, our relationship with Amelia didn't improve even after she left home, remaining tense. I had hoped that saving money could be a common ground for our family, but that too seemed unlikely. One day, I was driving to a large shopping mall in the suburbs, away from home. I was running an errand for James. James wasn't unable to go out, but he needed to carry a portable oxygen tank when he did. For the elderly James, carrying the heavy tank, even with a carrier, was burdensome, and the visible tubes made it obvious he was on oxygen therapy. Tired of being pitted by acquaintances saying, "Poor thing," each time they saw him, James preferred staying home. There were often errands, but my husband usually handled them when he was home. Being careful not to leave James alone, this time I had no choice but to leave him for the errand. I was worried, but James wasn't helpless. He only needed the tank for breathing. He was still capable of doing quite a bit by himself. While it's important to be mindful of saving electricity, I asked him to use the air conditioning as needed, and I set off for shopping. I completed the shopping without issues and returned home with the groceries a few hours later. I had left in the late morning, but now it was evening. Before entering the house, I picked up my mobile phone. There might be a message from my husband about dinner. However, what I saw on the screen shocked me. Huh? There were numerous missed calls. From my husband, James, and the general hospital where James goes. A cold sweat broke out on my back. While driving, I had switched my phone to a mode that wouldn't ring. And in my rush to get home early today, I forgot to switch it back, unaware of the incoming calls. A sense of foreboding crossed my mind. First, I tried calling back my husband, but the phone just kept ringing without connecting. Growing more anxious, I then tried James's number, but there was no answer. As a last hope, I called the hospital. A receptionist answered, and trying to stay composed, I asked about James. "James is currently hospitalized. I can't provide more details over the phone. Could you please come to the hospital?" After being transferred to several departments, I was informed of this and froze. I quickly replied, "I'm on my way," and hurriedly turned the car key, restarting the engine. The car was filled with urgency. As if reflecting my anxiety, the roads were congested. James had been fine when I left, waving goodbye as usual. I regretted leaving him alone, wondering how he could have been hospitalized so suddenly. Arriving at the hospital, I headed to the directed room. Walking down the tense corridor, I quietly opened the door, and there sat my husband, who had been unreachable. We looked at each other in surprise. But he explained that he was at the hospital waiting for James's tests. Which is why he couldn't answer the phone. I couldn't answer the phone either, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, how is James doing?
He prompted me to look at James, who was sleeping in the bed. His complexion seemed a bit off, But his breathing, which I had been worried about, appeared calm.
He's okay. There's no problem with his condition. He's just here for some tests. Actually,
hearing from my husband that James was not in danger, I finally relaxed. But why was James hospitalized? Just as I was about to ask that question, the door to the room burst open. It was Amelia, rushing in, her eyes filled with fear. She ignored us and ran straight to James's bed. Seeing him lying there, she let out a loud scream.
What happened? Dad!
Her voice was so loud that my husband hurried to calm her down. But her frantic voice echoed through the room.
Please calm down!
My husband tried to pull her away from the bed. Her frightened voice eventually quietened down, but then she suddenly glared at me and started yelling with intense emotion.
What were you doing while you were with him?
I was overwhelmed by her anger and lost for words. My husband intervened to calm her, but her anger was still directed at me. Confused, I was caught in a strange sensation. James needed oxygen, but such a sudden hospitalization seemed unlikely.
Wait, can we talk calmly?
My husband turned to us with a calm voice, explaining what he knew. James was transported here because the power to his oxygen device had turned off. After I left, James had been sleeping in his room, but during that time, the power went off. Awoken by breathlessness and trying to turn the device back on, it wouldn't work, and he couldn't reach me or my husband. James connected a portable tank and managed to calm down, but he was anxious about waiting for us to return. Feeling a headache, James decided to go to the hospital, but we usually drive him, so he had no way to get there. He tried to call a taxi, but his hands were trembling, making it difficult to dial. So, James went to ask the neighbors to call a taxi for him. The neighbor who came out to the entrance screamed upon seeing James. He was taken to the living room, laid down, and cooled with ice packs while waiting for the ambulance. That's when James realized he had gotten heat stroke. After that, thanks to the appropriate treatment at the hospital, James's condition stabilized and he was safe. My husband heard from the doctor that James might not have noticed the heat due to his age, and he thought the trembling hands and headache were just symptoms of aging. Because James had convulsions, he was immediately treated and hospitalized for testing, leading to the current situation. After hearing this explanation from my husband, I asked him a daring question.
It's unlikely that the power source for the device wouldn't work. Didn't we install it in a place where the plug couldn't be accidentally pulled out?
My husband furrowed his brow and seemed deep in thought. Amelia remained silent during this time, but her face was visibly pale.
That's right. It's impossible for it to come unplugged on its own. I went back home to check, and the plug wasn't out.
Then how? I was even more confused by my husband's words. He had returned home to prepare for the hospital stay, and found that although the power was off, the plug was still connected. He then looked sternly at Amelia. It was clear she was hiding something, but I couldn't understand why he was so angry. Suddenly, my husband shouted at Amelia.
You cut off the breaker, didn't you? Say something.
Amelia jolted, beginning to tremble. She tried to say something, but only inaudible sounds came out. Then, my husband pulled something out of his pocket. The hospital had tried to contact me, my husband, and Amelia several times, but my husband was the first to get through. When he returned home for the preparations, he immediately sensed something odd. As soon as he opened the door, a wave of incredible heat hit him. The lights in the entrance hall didn't work. Realizing this, he checked around the house and found all electrical appliances were off. He rushed to check the breaker, and as expected, the switch was turned off. Surprised and suspicious, he wondered why this happened. There was no event like a lightning strike to cause the breaker to trip. And no other houses seemed to be affected by a power outage. However, he then remembered something. Our house had several security cameras installed. Before we got married, a burglar had broken into the house, and James had installed them for my mother-in-law's peace of mind. Even though we were saving money, these were kept for everyone's safety, and we weren't allowed to remove them.
Footage up until the power outage should still be there,
my husband thought, so he quickly restored the power and checked the recordings.
I have the footage here. I transferred it to show both of you.
In the hospital room, my husband took out his mobile phone. He showed us the transferred footage. The first thing shown was the familiar view of our house's entrance. A few minutes after I left, Amelia appeared. I was surprised to learn she had come to the house and involuntarily glanced at her. She entered the house using her key. Unlike her usual noise, she looked around suspiciously, almost as if she was checking if I was away. My husband then switched to the footage from a camera inside the entrance. The breaker in our house is located near the ceiling above the shoe rack. Amelia climbed onto a chair meant for wearing shoes and opened the breaker's cover.
What are you doing?
Even though I knew what was coming, I couldn't suppress my scream. The camera had sound recognition, so along with the movement noises, her dreadful whispering was recorded.
This is the breaker, right? If the fridge stops, Emma will calm down a bit.
Her malicious laughter echoed in the silent hospital room.
I'll save electricity for you, your favorite.
After that, the footage ended due to her turning off the breaker. We were all speechless and motionless. If the breaker was off, of course, the whole house's power supply would stop. The contents of the fridge must have spoiled in the hours before my husband noticed. Her frantic behavior when she rushed into the hospital room suggested she hadn't realized her actions could endanger James's life, a very malicious way to punish me. However, her reaction was unbelievable.
It's because you're always nagging about saving electricity.
Without any signs of remorse, and with tears in her eyes, Amelia started justifying herself.
I didn't know James was home. I thought he had gone out with you. It's your fault for leaving him behind.
She kept repeating I had no idea this would happen. Contrasting her tearful self-defense, I was filled with anger.
Breaking in like a thief and turning off the breaker, it's a miracle he survived. What if something had happened to Dad?
I couldn't help but blame Amelia, but she shouted back at me in defense.
But it's your fault. It's because of you that James is in this situation.
Her accusations pierced my heart. Indeed, I shouldn't have left James alone. Was it my mistake to leave him, thinking going far would be a burden? The tension in the hospital room was palpable, then suddenly broken.
Be quiet.
James, who was supposed to be sleeping, scolded her sternly. He couldn't raise his voice much due to his illness. Being inherently calm, his outburst surprised us all. All three of us turned to him in unison.
Do you realize what you have done? You've caused trouble for everyone and nearly killed me. Emma is not to blame.
James's eyes were filled with anger and disappointment. His tone was stern, unlike his usual gentle demeanor. Awakened by Amelia's screaming and commotion, he had heard everything, including the surveillance camera discussion.
If you're going to continue making noise, leave. And don't come back to the house ever again.
Scolded harshly, Amelia turned pale and froze, but soon began to cry loudly, which was very disturbing. She apologized to James, but he insisted she leave, and my husband escorted her out of the room. James was discharged just a few days later. When we went to the hospital to pick him up, he greeted us with a smile, seemingly recovered. However, upon returning home, Amelia was waiting at the front door. She hadn't shown up in front of us since that incident. We were expecting an apology, but her words were the same as before. It's your fault. It's all because of you that James ended up like this. James and my husband were exasperated. Unwilling to admit fault and still blaming me, James stepped forward. Be thankful I'm not reporting you to the police because you're family. Your actions are absolutely unforgivable. His cold voice in the hospital room hadn't changed, and she fell silent. But James didn't stop there. He seemed to despise her from the bottom of his heart. It's disownment. I can't believe you still don't realize the severity of what you've done. Don't come to our house again. I went to the hospital, but I won't attend your wedding either. He spoke harshly, pushed Amelia aside, and entered the house vigorously. She was probably not expecting to be disowned by her own father, and stood there in shock. We decided to stand by James and support him. So, we entered the house, leaving her behind. Amelia repeatedly tried to apologize afterwards. But James ignored all her attempts. Having been troubled by her too much, we had no sympathy and upheld his decision. James had been asked to financially support Amelia's wedding and honeymoon, but he refused all requests and declared he wouldn't attend the wedding. One day, Amelia ambushed me outside the house. She desperately apologized and begged me to persuade James, but I had already decided not to forgive her. Knowing she would persist if ignored, I quietly listened to her before leaving her there and walking away. This series of events eventually became known to Amelia's fiancé. James had refused to attend the wedding for safety reasons, which puzzled her fiancé, prompting him to contact James. Unaware of the full story, her fiancé was shocked to hear about the emergency caused by Amelia and hurriedly apologized to James. The fiancé, unlike Amelia, seemed to have reasonable judgment. Calling her actions attempted murder, the wedding was eventually called off. They hadn't moved into their new home yet. But the fiancé canceled it and kicked Amelia out. Having already quit her job and spent her savings on beauty treatments in preparation for the wedding, she was left nearly broke. With the wedding cancellation costs to bear, she fell into debt but didn't show up at our doorstep. Meanwhile, the three of us were living peacefully. Without Amelia's disruptive presence, James's health seemed to be improving. Though we couldn't be complacent due to his age, a care facility seemed unnecessary for now. We were even planning a trip.
Get to cleaning the house already. Slaves don't get to rest.
That's what my husband Anthony said as he splashed beer on me. I was so taken aback by the suddenness of it all that I froze. My body was wet, and the distinctive smell of beer filled my nostrils. As I stood there in disbelief, Anthony hurled more abuse my way. What should I do? What does Anthony want from me? Just when I felt cornered and at a loss for words, I heard a voice from the computer. The moment he heard that voice, Anthony, who had been red-faced and angry just seconds before, stiffened and collapsed on the spot. My name is Chloe. I'm 33 years old. I work as an office clerk at a company in a certain region, putting my all into my job every day. My days consist of dealing with large amounts of data and documents and punching numbers into a calculator. I think to myself that the company should make more use of computers, but being one of the younger employees within the company, I didn't have much say. I worked while being mindful of my superiors and was forced to attend drinking parties I didn't want to go to. My spirit was utterly exhausted.
These numbers are wrong again.
I'm sorry.
Please, I'm really counting on you. You've been making a lot of mistakes lately.
Yes, sir. The mistakes kept piling up due to my fatigue, further diminishing the little confidence in my work I had to begin with. I wondered if quitting would be better for me. It was during these times that a certain man started coming to the company as a salesperson. This man was the person who would later become my husband, Anthony. From just one look, it was clear that Anthony was a kind man. Even to me, who only did things like making coffee, Anthony was always kind. I found myself drawn to Anthony before I knew it. However, I couldn't bring myself to express my feelings to Anthony. It was all one-sided on my part, and I was sure Anthony didn't think anything of me. That thought was always in my mind. But a few months after Anthony started coming to the company, to my surprise, he approached me. We started going out for drinks after work, which led to us dating. After 2 years of dating, we were able to get married. With our marriage, I quit my job, and Anthony and I started a new life in a new home. We picked out a place we both liked after visiting various real estate agents. Quitting my job and thinking about the happy life ahead with Anthony made my heart lighten. However, the life I had envisioned was not to be. A month into our marriage, I noticed Anthony was acting differently. "Welcome home, Anthony. You're early today." "Yeah, well." He didn't look at me and didn't even greet me back properly. Seeing Anthony so different from usual genuinely worried me. After that, Anthony seemed somewhat listless.
Are you okay? You seem tired.
Huh? Oh. He seemed more irritable than tired. Indeed, he was different from his usual self. I thought maybe he was just tired today, and didn't think much of it. However, the next day and the day after that, Anthony's attitude remained unchanged. Gradually, it wasn't just his attitude and greetings. He stopped taking the sandwiches I made for him and didn't contact me when he was coming home late. I could tell that he was starting to treat me carelessly. Maybe I had done something to offend Anthony. As I pondered over this, my own time flew by. I was filled with insecurities about my behavior and thoughts of Anthony. Things changed a few months after Anthony started showing a change in his attitude. He began to verbally abuse me out of nowhere. One evening, Anthony spoke to me without touching his dinner. "Hey, Chloe. Do you realize?"
Realize what?
Without a subject, his sudden question was impossible to understand. I urged Anthony to explain further. Without any sign of remorse, Anthony said, "Your cooking is terrible." "What? Terrible?"
Yeah. I guessed you hadn't noticed. Think about how I feel, having to eat such terrible food every day.
I had often cooked meals during our dating period, but he had never made such a complaint before. He always seemed to enjoy the meals, and he had told me many times they were delicious. Watching him like this, I never thought Anthony would find the meals I made unpalatable. "You used to say it was delicious."
What? Did I?
Seeing my anxious face, Anthony started laughing loudly. Then, after a good laugh, Anthony put down his fork and went back to the bedroom. Looking at the untouched meal, I felt indescribable. I too put down my fork and kept replaying Anthony's words in my mind. Had he been hiding that he found the meals unpleasant all this time? Or had my cooking skills just declined? I thought about it a lot, but couldn't come to a satisfying conclusion. However, one thought did seem to make sense. His recent behavior, his words just now. I thought maybe Anthony had come to dislike me. At first, I thought maybe he was just a little tired, but his recent behavior has definitely been too much. The Anthony I knew would have told me if he was tired. It must be so. But that would mean I did something to make him dislike me. However, I can't think of anything that might have caused it. My doubts about Anthony only grew. Then, another 2 months passed. Day by day, Anthony's attitude worsened, and the Anthony I knew during our dating days seemed to have disappeared completely. He verbally abused me daily and made a point to show his irritation by making noise.
Do you even know how to clean properly? Clean? Yeah. You haven't done the bathroom or the toilet, and the living room is filthy too.
I always tried to keep the house clean, doing the bathroom and toilet cleaning daily. I even vacuumed every day. What else does Anthony want me to do? While I was feeling down, Anthony didn't stop hurling insults. What hurt me the most was him saying,
"Why did I even marry a woman like you?"
Was all the love he professed just a lie? The moment I thought that, I felt tears streaming down my cheeks.
Ugh, why are you crying? Cut it out with the fake tears.
In the past, if I cried, he would comfort me. Now, he only says cruel things. Anthony went back to the bedroom, mocking me. Initially, we shared the same bedroom, but now I've been pushed out. I've gotten quite used to sleeping on the living room sofa. I knew I was being taken for granted and not treated with respect. But I couldn't bring myself to decide on divorce. I still had faith in Anthony. However, as expected, my feelings didn't reach him, and his treatment of me only got worse day by day.
"Hey, dinner."
As soon as I thought he was asking for food,
"I can't eat this terrible food,"
he would complain. I suggested eating out a few times, but for some reason, Anthony stubbornly refused.
"Why?"
He wouldn't give me any reason. Anthony would come home from work, complain about the entrance being dirty or the toilet being dirty, and demand food. Since his attitude started to change, I've often wondered what I did wrong, but seeing Anthony's behavior up to now, I've concluded he's just using me to vent his stress. The contradiction between what he says and his actions, constantly finding fault and berating me, it's clear he's just venting. I understand Anthony is tired from work. But I'm human too. Being constantly criticized, I too accumulate stress. I had hoped for a change, but I've reached my limit.
"Hey, Anthony. Can we stop this?"
I gathered my courage to talk to Anthony.
"I don't know if it's because you're tired from work, but can you stop taking it out on me? I'm also stressed from being criticized by you every day."
Anthony looked at me in surprise, speechless.
"Huh? What are you talking about?"
It's just like I said.
You come home and immediately start complaining about me.
I'm trying my best, you know? Anthony was half laughing as he listened to my words. But as soon as I finished speaking, his face turned red with anger.
"You know what? Who do you think you are? You're a housewife, but you can't clean or cook properly. What's wrong with complaining? Living carelessly like that. That's what pisses me off."
Then, can you tell me what's wrong so I can fix it?
"No, I won't say. It's clear that nothing will change even if I tell you. You need to figure out what's wrong by yourself."
Anthony evaded the question when I asked what was wrong with me. This conversation alone made it clear that Anthony only saw me as an outlet for his stress. Our relationship worsened even more after I expressed my feelings. The verbal abuse and attitude towards me intensified. I sighed, reminiscing about the happier times in the past. However, one day, I received a call from an unexpected person. It was my mother-in-law, Jody. Jody and I get along well, but we don't call each other often, so I quickly answered the phone. "Hello?"
"Oh, Chloe, how have you been?"
Jody's voice sounded very cheerful over the phone. After some small talk, Jody brought up the main topic.
"Huh? Handmade?"
"I was thinking I wanted a new hobby recently, and I remembered that you make handmade crafts. I was hoping you could teach me some stuff. Actually, I make handmade crafts as a hobby. I buy materials and tools, and spend time on my hobby when Anthony is not around. I had told Jody about my handmade crafts before, but I never thought she would remember.
Yes, of course. If I can be of any help.
That call led me to frequently talk with Jody. Our calls weren't just ordinary calls, but video calls. Initially, we just talked normally, but as I wanted to show her what I was working on and explain the materials in detail, we switched to video calls. Our houses aren't that far apart, but going there every time is honestly a hassle. When it's time for my appointment with Jody, I enter the room where my crafting tools are and craft while talking on the phone. My heart, which was distressed by Anthony's actions, felt purified while I was talking with Jody. By the way, how have things been with Anthony recently? Are you getting along?
Yes. I'm glad to hear that.
I didn't talk about Anthony to Jody. I didn't want to worry her, and more than anything, I wanted to forget about Anthony during the time I spent with Jody. Even after starting to do video calls with Jody, Anthony's attitude remained terrible. I was desperate not to let Jody catch on to anything about Anthony. However, one day, an incident happened. It was a few weeks after I started doing video calls with Jody, on a Saturday. As usual, after finishing housework, I was on a video call with Jody when the door to the room opened.
Anthony!
Turning around, I saw Anthony standing near the door with something in his hand. Completely unaware of the video call, Anthony approached me.
Hey, what are you doing here? What about the cleaning? The laundry? Why aren't you doing them?
I've already done them. What are you talking about? Didn't you see?
Huh? I didn't see anything.
Well, he had been watching TV in the living room the whole time, so his response was expected. You're always just watching TV.
What? Shut up.
Anthony, further aggravated by my words, said,
Get to cleaning the house already. Slaves don't get to rest.
And then he splashed something he was holding on me. I soon found out what it was. It was beer. I was drenched in beer, smelling of it all over. And Anthony laughed at the sight. Shocked by the suddenness, I was speechless.
If you understand, then get to work.
Then, he kicked over a stack of books nearby. Anthony's mocking laughter filled the room. I couldn't take any action and just watched as the books got soaked with beer. But then,
Is that all you have to say?
I heard a familiar male voice from the computer.
Huh? Dad?
Yes, the voice was that of Anthony's dad. My father-in-law, Liam.
What are you doing? I saw everything. You verbally abused Chloe and then splashed beer on her. When did you become such a terrible person? It's a misunderstanding, Dad. That's not what it was.
As Liam began to speak, the bravado from before was nowhere to be seen in Anthony, who now appeared completely cowed. Despite seeing Anthony like this, Liam didn't stop his anger.
What misunderstanding? It doesn't seem like this was the first time, was it? What are you playing dumb for? Really, when did you change like this?
Liam was clearly exasperated. It's understandable to be dismayed if your own son was doing such terrible things. Ignoring Anthony, who was just standing there with his mouth open, Liam made a proposal to me. Chloe, won't you come to our house right now?
Right now?
Yes. I'm worried about leaving you in that house. If it's okay with you, I can come to pick you up right away. I was honestly surprised by Liam's invitation. But, thinking about it calmly, staying with Anthony alone, I really couldn't predict what he might do next. Would that be okay?
Of course. I'll be there soon. Anthony, if you do anything to Chloe, you won't get off lightly.
With that, Liam hung up. I immediately started preparing to go to my in-laws' house, waiting at the entrance for Liam to arrive. Anthony didn't do anything to harm me, looking uneasy instead. A few minutes later, my in-laws arrived, and I headed to their house with them. When Liam opened the front door, Anthony looked frightened in a way I had never seen before, clearly very afraid of Liam.
Anthony, you should spend tonight reflecting on your actions alone. Understand?
Dad, I'm sorry.
What are you saying? The person you should be apologizing to isn't me, it's Chloe. Just think about what you've done alone. Reflect on it. Got it?
Liam said this and led me outside. I had managed to change my clothes, but didn't have the chance to shower. Liam wrapped a towel around my body and put me in the car. A few minutes later, when we arrived at my in-laws' house, Jody was waiting for me.
Chloe, are you okay?
I'm sorry. Jody gently embraced my shoulder and led me to the bathroom.
Take your time. There are clothes and towels here for you.
Thank you. The events had unfolded so suddenly that my mind was still trying to make sense of everything. After taking a bath, I changed into the clothes provided and headed to the living room.
Thank you for the bath.
Don't mention it. Liam was looking grim, and Jody appeared concerned as they sat on the sofa. I took a seat on the sofa as Jody urged me to.
Chloe, can you tell us everything that's happened up to now?
It wasn't the first time, was it?
Well,
please, Chloe. I didn't know where to start and kept silent. But my in-laws patiently waited for me to speak. A few minutes later, I began to recount everything that had happened since our marriage and why I hadn't consulted them earlier. They listened quietly until I finished speaking.
And so, it came to what happened earlier. Why didn't you tell us? I didn't want to worry you. I'm sorry. Well, I understand how you feel, Chloe, but don't let that guys like him get carried away like that.
I'm sorry. I was scolded, but I knew they were both worried about me. After a while, silence fell again. Both seemed to be pondering, and the atmosphere didn't invite interruption. After a few minutes of silence, Liam finally spoke slowly.
Do you still love Anthony? What?
Anthony is likely to repeat the same behavior. Maybe it would be best to consider a divorce seriously. Jody nodded in agreement next to Liam. Divorce. I had never expected Anthony's parents to suggest divorcing him. Certainly, it might be easier to divorce. But, could this be an opportunity for him to change? The dilemma of still being in love made the situation even more difficult. However, they quietly waited for my decision. After a few minutes of thought, I made my choice. I'll get a divorce. I decided on divorce. There was a part of me that wanted to believe in Anthony, but after much thought, it was clear he had never listened to anything I said before. If I didn't divorce and went back, he would likely return to his terrible attitude towards me again. That's what I thought. My decision seemed to have relieved them both. After some discussion, we decided I should file for divorce as soon as the next day. This way, I could finally be free from Anthony. Even though I had hoped for Anthony's change of heart until the very end, part of me felt relieved once the divorce was decided. The next day, I went to the house with my in-laws, holding the divorce papers in hand. As soon as we rang the doorbell, we could hear footsteps inside, and Anthony came out. Chloe. And Dad and Mom. Seeing the faces of my in-laws, Anthony showed an obviously disappointed expression. It should have been clear that I wouldn't return alone so soon after what had happened. We entered and sat down on the sofa. My in-laws also sat down beside me.
Anthony was still flustered and hadn't even apologized to me yet.
Watching him, I said, "Anthony, I want a divorce."
What? Divorce?
"I've thought about it, and I no longer have the confidence to continue with you. If we start living together again, your attitude will just revert back, and over time, you'll forget about what happened this time and repeat the same behavior, won't you?" "That's not. Can you say for sure that won't happen? Besides, you haven't properly apologized to me yet. It's clear you haven't reflected at all from your actions."
I'm sorry.
Anthony quickly apologized after hearing my words, but it was too late. I had no intention of forgiving Anthony anymore. It's too late for everything. Just sign the divorce papers quickly. With my in-laws on my side, I could boldly express my thoughts to Anthony. Too late.
"Anthony, what were you thinking last night? Not even apologizing to Chloe, and now you're surprised to be faced with a divorce. If you were aware of how terrible you've been, being divorced wouldn't come as a surprise. I did do terrible things, but I never thought it would lead to divorce. Not expecting to be divorced? You really have a blissfully ignorant brain."
Anthony shrank back at my words. All his bravado seemed to have been left somewhere far behind. In the end, Anthony reluctantly signed the divorce papers. Our relationship ended without a single sincere apology from him.
"By the way,"
as I was packing to leave the house, I asked something that had been on my mind.
"Why did your attitude change all of a sudden after we got married? There was nothing like this when we were dating."
Reluctantly, Anthony opened up.
I didn't want to be looked down upon. That's all.
"Looked down upon? Did I ever act like that when we were dating?"
No, you didn't.
"Keep your weird fantasies in check. It's really unbelievable."
Okay. With that, I left the house with my in-laws, never to return again. I felt a bit sad to leave the house itself, to which I had grown attached. After filing the divorce papers, I stayed with my in-laws. Being a housewife without my own income, my in-laws told me I could live with them. Of course, I was nervous at first. But gradually, I got used to the atmosphere of my in-laws' house and could even enjoy doing handicrafts with Jody. During this time, Anthony tried to contact me, but Liam made it clear through my mobile phone.
"We're cutting all ties with you."
And he never contacted me again. Anthony probably never imagined I would be living with his parents. Seeing that he tried to contact me even after the divorce, it was clear he still looked down on me. Divorcing such a man was the right decision. I can't thank my in-laws enough for encouraging the divorce. Now, a year after the divorce, I've started living on my own and working part-time, leading a fulfilling life. I felt it wasn't right to keep relying on my in-laws' house forever. Though I've moved out, I still keep in touch with my in-laws and continue to receive their support. They've treated me like their own family, even though we're not related by blood. My current goal is to repay my in-laws. What could I do to make them happy? Today, I continue to live with gratitude towards my in-laws. "You're not allowed in here." Linda blocked my way, standing right in front of me. I reconsidered, thinking maybe the funeral was not ready yet, but I was not just an attendee, I was a family member. I looked into Linda's face for an answer, but there was none written there. "You can't come in."
"No, but I'm Tom's wife."
At my attempt to reason, Linda bursted into laughter.
"There is no way a wife is a family member. You're an outsider, so you can't attend the funeral. Get it? Now please leave."
Linda pointed towards the door, urging me to exit. Swallowing what I wanted to say, I stared straight into her face.
"So should I really leave?"
My name is Kate, edging into my mid-30s at 35 years old. I work as a lawyer in a small legal office in a regional city. I married Tom, my colleague and age mate from the same office, 5 years ago. Being ambitious, Tom switched to a major law firm 3 years ago and has been busy ever since. He suggested I switch too, but I declined. I was content with my current office and job. My work, though, was a bit different from what the general public imagines for a lawyer. Primarily, I supported rehabilitation for those recently out of prison or on probation. I assisted with legal procedures and connect them with welfare and medical professionals when needed. Many imagine lawyers as flamboyantly active in courtrooms. That's exactly Tom's job, bustling between the court and office daily. Of course, I was not uninterested in such work. However, an incident led me to take an interest in rehabilitation support. Linda was displeased with this and looked down on my job as helping those who've strayed from society. I understood her to some extent. The world is always harsh on offenders. Of course, I don't believe offenders should be redeemed without atoning either. But Linda's disdain was extreme. It's not just my job she despised, but me personally. Every time we met at my in-laws' house, she never missed a chance for snide remarks.
When will Kate quit her job to have kids?
Linda's sarcastic voice reached me as I assisted Jack. For years, Jack's health had been failing, requiring in-home care, which Linda barely provided. So, I filled in, enduring Linda's barbs as I care for Jack.
But Kate's middle-aged now, maybe kids are out of the question. Why didn't Tom marry someone younger?
Ignoring Linda's complaints, I gently laid Jack on the bed. Trying not to catch Linda's attention, I sighed. Then, Jack's lips moved slightly, seemingly saying not to worry. I smiled awkwardly at Jack. No matter how busy I was or how much Linda taunted me, I didn't stop caring for Jack. Sadly, Jack's condition kept worsening. Just a week ago, he was able to enjoy fruits, but now he can't chew. Not just me, Linda too was shocked by Jack's rapid decline. To the point of avoiding his room. Doctors said he had a week left at most. Realizing his end, Jack insisted on no more hospitalizations, wanting to stay home. Jack apologized repeatedly for the trouble as I cared for him, but I've never felt burdened. Jack seemed to resent his dependence on others for survival. I tried to spend my days with Jack as cheerfully as possible, hiding the shock I harbored within. That changed with a single, desperate accusation from Linda.
You're just after Jack's inheritance, aren't you?
Linda hurled these words at me as I was about to enter Jack's room with his change of clothes. Confused, I stood frozen in the hallway.
All your caregiving won't earn you a cent.
Wait a minute.
I never said anything about wanting the inheritance.
As I protested, Linda's eyes widened even more.
You're trying to get on Jack's good side to influence his will, aren't you? I know it, even if you don't say it, Kate.
Linda glared at me angrily, but I couldn't understand. Until she mentioned it, I hadn't thought of the inheritance at all. I purely wanted to be there for Jack, making his remaining time comfortable, choosing to spend more time with him than at work. I had no ulterior motive to receive an inheritance through my caregiving. Tom, alerted by the commotion, came upstairs.
What's going on here? Why are you shouting?
Tom, Linda's saying.
Listen, Tom. This woman, she's after Jack's inheritance.
Linda's words drowned out mine. Hearing Linda's claim, Tom's expression darkened.
Kate, are you really after the inheritance?
Faced with Tom's suspicious gaze, I shook my head.
Of course not. You know, Tom. Linda hasn't been caring for Jack at all. That's not true. I'm not involved because you said to leave it to you.
I felt dizzy at Linda's absurd claims. She was trying to paint me as the villain, feeding all sorts of things to Tom. I prayed Tom wouldn't just take Linda's words at face value, but my hope was in vain. Tom looked at me with contempt.
So, what Mom said was true?
Tom muttered to himself, seemingly convinced. At that moment, Linda smirked at me. A look of victory visible only to me. I can't trust someone who insults mom to care for dad. Please leave this house. Tom's voice was cold as he made this declaration. Struggling to find my voice, I managed to speak. Who will care for Jack then? It's obviously mom. Who else? Caught off guard by being suddenly addressed, Linda panicked. She probably hadn't expected to be tasked with caring for Jack herself. I handed her Jack's clothes, her smile strained. I'm a bit busy today. But Kate can do it instead. Just no inheritance. With that, Linda hurried downstairs. Tom, seeing me with the clothes, tersely told me not to do anything unnecessary and followed Linda down. I couldn't believe my actions were misconstrued this way. Feeling dejected, I entered Jack's room. Jack, thought to be asleep, was sitting up slowly in his electric bed, watching me intently. Did you hear that? I asked awkwardly, and Jack nodded slowly. He motioned for me to sit beside the bed. As I gently took a seat in a nearby chair, Jack began to speak in a whispery, frail voice.
Kate, I know better than anyone that you're not the kind of person to do such things.
Jack muttered in pain, his words coming out in fits and starts.
I'm truly grateful for everything you've done. I can't thank you enough.
Having said what he needed to, Jack slowly closed his eyes. And that was our last conversation. The funeral, per Jack's wishes, was to be held at my in-laws' house. It was planned as a small ceremony, with only family, relatives, and a few close acquaintances. On the day, it was raining from morning, and I was careful not to get my mourning clothes wet as I walked to the in-laws' house. Tom, serving as the chief mourner, had left home earlier than me. He's probably meeting up with Linda by now, going over the day's proceedings. The misunderstanding that I was after Jack's inheritance hadn't been cleared. Since that incident, Tom blatantly looked down on me. Now fully on Linda's side, I watched him without thought. With Jack gone, everything seemed inconsequential to me. Upon reaching the in-laws' house, Linda was waiting at the entrance. As I tried to pass her with a brief greeting, she grabbed my arm. You're not allowed in here. What? Linda stood there, blocking my way. I thought maybe things weren't ready, but I was not just an attendee, I was a part of the family. I looked into Linda's face for an answer, but it wasn't there. There's no way you can enter. No, but I'm also Tom's wife. At my response, Linda burst out laughing. There is no way a wife is a family member. You're an outsider. You can't attend the funeral. Understand? Now please leave. Linda pointed at the front door, urging me to leave. I swallowed what I wanted to say and stared straight into her face. So should I really leave? Perhaps it was my unexpectedly strong gaze that made Linda falter for a moment. She looked at me suspiciously, thinking if I had some ulterior motives. But finding nothing, Linda turned her back to me. Just leave, please. I don't even want to see your face. Linda tried to dismiss me with a somewhat blustering tone. There was only one thing left for me to do. Leave quietly. It was regrettable that I couldn't say my final goodbye to Jack, but it was the only option. Please tell the relatives I'm sorry I couldn't attend. With that last bit of resistance, I left the in-laws' house. As I did, a man in a black funeral attire entered. He looked surprised to see me. I laughed off his questioning gaze, which seemed to ask why I was leaving before the funeral. I couldn't have lied under his scrutinizing gaze. Suddenly, the area around the in-laws' house felt like a different world. Several black luxury cars were parked nearby. Shouts from the entrance reached my ears, making me stop in my tracks. Amidst the men's angry shouts, I heard Linda's scream and Tom's anguished voice. The curious neighbors peeked out from their doors and windows, intrigued by the commotion. Sighing, I returned to the in-laws' house. I didn't want to help Linda, but letting the situation escalate would be problematic. As I appeared among the men, a glimpse of hope flickered in Linda's eyes, who was almost crying.
Kate! Help! These people say they're the mafia!
I felt like holding my head in despair at this expected turn of events. But I was the only one who could resolve the situation. I spotted a familiar face among the men and called out to him. "You all seem as lively as ever." The man noticed my return and smiled.
Well, if Kate's in trouble, we can't just stand by.
Linda let out a short scream when she saw me.
You're with the mafia too!
Linda trembled at her own misunderstanding. That's absurd. But I quickly dismissed it. The men surrounding Linda and Tom stepped aside, allowing a path. Walking through was a man in a tailor-made black funeral suit, his gaze intense. It was Ben, the man I had passed when leaving the in-laws' house earlier.
Quite bold to turn away a benefactor of our organization, aren't you?
Linda, intimidated by Ben, collapsed to the ground.
We have nothing to do with the mafia.
Linda bravely retorted, but she recoiled, still sitting on the floor as the men closed in. Tom stood frozen in the corner, wanting nothing to do with the situation.
Does this woman know anything?
Ben asked me in surprise. I shook my head. I turned to Linda, still sitting on the floor, and addressed her.
Do you remember what happened 7 years ago when Jack was arrested?
Linda's face contorted, possibly recalling the incident. 7 years ago, Jack was arrested as a suspect in a case. I, still a novice lawyer then, was in charge of his defense. To put it simply, Jack was innocent. He had not committed the crime. But Jack stubbornly insisted he was guilty, as if protecting someone.
The person Jack was protecting was a member of our organization,
Ben added solemnly. Eventually, persuaded by senior members, a younger member came forward and Jack was released. But the price of the stand-in was heavy, and Jack's reintegration into society was difficult. That's when I developed an interest in rehabilitation support. While legally supporting Jack's reintegration, I also served as a liaison with the mafia trying to contact him. Arrests and releases were common in the mafia. Every time, I was called upon to spend days with them. Kate not only looked after Jack but also our younger members. Nobody usually wants to take care of people fresh out of prison. It seemed the mafia's reputation for loyalty wasn't just a fiction. They felt indebted to Jack for trying to take the fall for one of their young members and vowed to always help when in trouble. And somehow, that promise had extended to me. Kate's like our consulting lawyer. Ben turned to me with a smile that didn't quite match his sharp gaze. Still intimidated by Ben's changing expressions, I nodded awkwardly. Ben, who had smiled at me, now glared at Linda as if he had long forgotten the earlier moment.
Where did you put Jack's money?
A very cold voice echoed in the entrance hall. Linda finally started to tremble. Looking for an excuse, her gaze wandered meaninglessly.
Tell the truth,
Ben said casually, and Linda broke down. Tears flowed as she shook her head in anger.
I spent it all. It's all dirty money anyway. Whatever my husband earns is mine to spend. What's wrong with using it?
Tom somehow managed to keep the agitated Linda from storming out of the house. Ben, who is accustomed to overwhelmingly tense situations, watched this without changing his expression.
Jack's money wasn't dirty. It was hard-earned cash from a burger joint, saved by our young guys. Did you spend everything Jack was saving to leave for Kate?
Ben's outcry echoed around.
I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Let me apologize on her behalf, please, no violence.
Tom was the first to reach his limit. He apologized deeply without a hint of shame. I was astounded watching Tom, who had been silent till now, turn apologetic when he sensed personal danger. He even said sorry to me for doubting me, but I was not in the mood to listen.
Can you pay back everything Jack saved for Kate?
Ben deliberately intimidated Tom and Linda with his glare. They nodded like puppets, their faces pale. Linda had embezzled over $100,000 of Jack's savings. It was shocking to learn that not only Linda but also Tom had been spending Jack's savings on drinks for colleagues and lottery tickets. Tom, suspected of private dealings with the mafia, was forced to resign from the law firm. I planned to divorce Tom once everything was settled. With Jack gone, I saw no need to force myself to maintain ties with Tom or Linda. Linda, under pressure from the mafia, sold her house and moved into an old, cheap apartment, working from morning till night. All to repay every penny of Jack's savings she had used. I never intended to take the money, but Ben insisted that Linda should fully understand the consequences of using someone else's money, so I agreed to go along with it. I continued to devote myself to my work, but recently a colleague invited me to start a new office together. They had always watched my work and thought I deserved a more liberating environment. I accepted the invitation and now spend busy yet fulfilling days establishing the new office.